It is 10:01. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. NFL owners' meetings are over in West Palm Beach. The vote to ban the tush push was tabled as discussions on it will continue. The topic likely will be revisited during spring meetings in May. And the Nashville Predators lost a fourth straight game, 8-4 on Tuesday against the Blue Jackets. 7 games left in the regular season. They'll visit the Stars tomorrow night. The Titans made a signing yesterday in veteran quarterback and special teamer Justin Hardy on a one-year deal. There was one signing in the NFL yesterday with 38-year-old defensive lineman Calais Campbell signing with the Cardinals on a one-year deal worth $5.5 million. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone. No one's getting taken out today. Let's have some fun. Much to discuss. Good morning. Hope everybody's well. Lucas Panzica with you alongside Robert Walsh until 1 o'clock as Buck enjoys his work vacation for one more day. And Robert, today I'm playing hurt. I know you think of me as a hero, and I'll accept that responsibility. But just know the sacrifice that I am making, walking in here, crutching in here, on my crutches after hurting my ankle yesterday and doing the show and soldiering on. Do you understand? For the love of the game, that's just what this means to me. How you doing?
Yeah, much better than you.
Much better.
It looks like you have a baseball duct taped to your ankle today. I'm efforting pulling it up for all the foot fanatics out there on Zone TV. I'm efforting pulling up a shot of your busted ankle, dude. What the hell are you doing?
Tuesday night, men's league soccer last night was playing, with some buddies. We have a team, and I'll play on any given week out there, 5 aside, 6 aside when it's outdoor. And it's the first game of the outdoor portion of the season. We've been playing indoor soccer for the last few months. So this is early in the game, 10 to 15 minutes in. I pick up the ball. I'm dribbling down the left side. I've got Apple TV's own Tony Husband making a run down the middle of the box. Former Nashville SC TV play-by-play voice, now doing MLS games for Apple. You can still hear him on the call for a lot of NSC games. And just trying to square it across into the middle of the field, a guy came in for the tackle and wiped me out. My foot caught on the turf. My ankle folded under my body. I felt and heard a pop, and down I go like a ton of bricks. I have not had any sort of injury like this since high school, which was also a sprained ankle. I have been very fortunate in my life. I was a kid that played outside and played sports, but knock on wood, I've never broken a bone in my life. In the moment, I thought that's what this was. No weight on it. I can barely put any weight on it this morning, but my beautiful orthopedic surgery fiance, Megan, does tell me it's not broken. It's just a really bad sprain. So you're welcome. I'm here. Athletes like myself, sometimes we get hurt. I can relate to Ramon Foster and Ron Slay. It's the exact same thing, what I've experienced compared to what those guys experienced in their professional careers. I don't see any differences, and I am soldiering on. I am playing hurt today, so I appreciate it. Appreciate your praise for me this morning with how impressed you were by me walking in here and prepping the show and doing the show.
And you didn't really even walk in here. You, as you put it, crutched in here. The Lucas Sprained Zika show. I'm happy for you. I'm glad you were able to finally reach the upper echelon. Heavy is the ankle that wears the crown.
Have you ever had to use crutches?
Never, dude. Anything that I've ever broken has been like fingers, toes, wrists, never anything weight-bearing. I never had to I was never demobilized by an injury. So I feel for you. And if I was, you better believe that I would milk it for everything that I could. I would be in a wheelchair. I would have one of those colostomy bags, or IV bags, not a colostomy bag.
You don't need a colostomy bag.
That's what you think. You don't know what I've been through. Exactly. I would milk it so hard if I had any injury at all. So the fact that you came in with a sprained ankle, that is 10 times more than I would do. I would have lied and said that I had food poisoning and stayed home the rest of the week. So I'm glad you came in, buddy.
They'd say, Robert, you sprained your ankle. Why do you have a colostomy bag? You don't understand.
You don't know the pain. You don't know what I go through. You don't live this life.
Oh, Tyler Dial on the FNM Bank chat says, it looks like I've been playing behind the Titans offensive line. Joe on the FNM Bank chat says, I have lost my Traylon Burks privileges. I'm not allowed to talk bad about him anymore after going through an injury of my own.
What do you mean? You're playing through your injury.
That's right. I am playing through my injury. Now, Traylon Burks has had some injuries that are impossible to play through, like concussions and ACLs, and the list has gone on. So that is not the case today. But enough about me. I'm sure Buck will make sufficient fun of me tomorrow if I still have to wear these godforsaken crutches tomorrow. I hope that's not the case. I can't put any weight on this thing. So I do have it elevated. I hope that's not an issue for Zach when he comes in here, the fact that my foot is propped up on the console right here. But that's what they say, right? Isn't it rice? Isn't that the protocol that you follow? Rest, ice, compress, elevate?
There you go. Okay, I'm glad you knew it. Well, this morning I thought it was actually rest. So you're much farther along than I am.
You thought that was the acronym, was REST.
Right.
Okay, so we soldier through, just like it feels like we're soldiering through the rest of this pre-draft process, right? The Titans, to their credit, despite being down at West Palm Beach, surrounded by media, Titans head coach Brian Callahan, GM Mike Borgonzi, President of Football Operations Chad Brinker, have been remarkably consistent in their messaging throughout the course of the pre-draft process, that they are nearing a decision, that they are weighing all options, and they have not arrived at one yet. Whether or not you believe them right now is entirely up to you. You can look at it in a couple of different ways that we talked about yesterday. They're either posturing and they know who they're taking, but, they just kind of want to leave that door cracked for the Godfather offer and a trade up to number one, or they're being honest. And maybe they will end up taking Cam Ward, number one overall, but at the beginning of April, which it is now, they weren't necessarily 100% sold on Cam Ward. And up until now, Robert, I have viewed that as a point of concern. If the Titans end up taking Cam Ward, I thought that would worry me, that you didn't have that conviction about him and you only ended up taking him because, he was the best prospect, but you just really didn't get a good enough offer to move off the number one pick, so you'll go ahead and take the best quarterback and you hope it works out. That is no longer a concern for me anymore, because the more I think about it, the more I realize it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what level of conviction you do or don't have in regards to what that player is going to be in his career, right? How many number one overall picks at quarterback have been selected by teams with overwhelming conviction that these are can't-miss prospects? How convicted were the Raiders that Jamarcus Russell was going to be the next big thing? How convicted were the Jaguars that Trevor Lawrence was a generational player? I mean, it would have been damn near impossible to trade up to number one with the Jacksonville Jaguars and move them off that pick and not take Trevor Lawrence. Think about how convicted the Bengals were, though, when you look at the flip side of it. With Joe Burrow, they had their mind made up in February, if you ask Brian Callahan. So it can work both ways, but at the end of the day, what that player ends up being is up to him and the situation around him. It is in no way tied to the level of conviction that a team has in that player. The San Francisco 49ers convinced themselves, Kyle Shanahan specifically, convinced himself that Trey Lance was the guy that they needed to trade up to get. In that, what was it, Robert, 2021 draft, that Trey Lance and Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and Zach Wilson draft, they had the conviction to go up, trade a boatload of picks to go get Trey Lance, and it didn't work out. That's not to say that the conviction part of it's not important for the Titans when they're deciding whether or not they want this guy to be their franchise quarterback, but I don't know how much it has to do with how successful he will be. We know that's a gamble no matter what. So I'm not as concerned about that as I think I have been in the last few days and weeks. What I am curious about is if that offer is still going to be floating out there. Because as we get closer to the draft, the more it feels like every other team is kind of settling into what they're going to be at quarterback. With the Browns right now, the buzz has nothing to do with the number one pick. It has to do with Kirk Cousins. That's the smoke right now around the Cleveland Browns. With Kenny Pickett already on the roster, the smoke is around a potential trade for Kirk Cousins. In the case of the Giants, other than a report in West Palm Beach telling us Joe Shane and Mike Borgonzi were having coffee the other day, there's been little to no smoke around the Giants calling the Titans about the number one pick. They've got Russell Wilson in place. He says he expects to be the starter. And Jameis Winston is in that quarterback room too. We've talked about this. That doesn't preclude them from going up to get a quarterback. And then what? You have to cut Jameis Winston? Like that would be the barrier to going up and getting the guy that you think could be your franchise quarterback? But would you say you're surprised at the lack of smoke around a potential trade for the number 1 overall pick right now?
I wouldn't say that it's a lack of smoke. I feel like they're doing their best to make it look like there's not smoke around it, but by saying like, oh, when you see the reports, the Titans are looking for a haul for this year's first-round pick, I think that's their version of smoke. I think that's their version of trying to drum it up. And you saw a little bit at the beginning of the process, but I think it's the beginning layers of smoke. You know, they're just gathering their kindling, gathering their embers. It's not like a full-fledged forest fire of, oh, yeah, they need a lot of interest in this trade pick. It seems like they're just doing what they need to do to have smoke around it, where the ambiguity is the smoke, rather.
And then it begs the question, just how much of a haul would the Titans have to receive in an offer to move out of the number 1 overall pick? In my mind, it would have to be more expensive than what we're used to seeing. More expensive than what the Bears traded the Panthers to move up to number 1. More expensive than what the Rams traded the Titans to move up to go draft Jared Goff in that 2016 NFL draft. In my mind, it would have to be maybe the most expensive trade for a number 1 overall pick that we've seen in the NFL draft in the modern era. Because the Tennessee Titans desperately need a quarterback. And if you're trading up to number 1 overall, you also desperately need a quarterback. And those examples we just cited, the Bears trading with the Panthers, the Rams trading with the Titans, both of those teams that moved away from the number 1 overall pick at the time had a quarterback in place. And the case of the Panthers, they still do. The Titans had Marcus Mariota. What we don't typically see is a team with the number 1 overall pick with a desperate need at quarterback trade out of the number 1 overall pick rather than take the best quarterback on the board. And that's why, to me, it would have to be the most expensive draft haul in terms of a trade that we have seen in the NFL draft to move up to number 1 overall. So, something we can discuss throughout the course of the show. But coming up next, we'll check in with Tennessee. Spring ball going on right now. The spring game coming up in 10 days at Neyland Stadium. The Vols had a scrimmage on Monday, and we also have the dust settling in the aftermath of Tennessee's run in the NCAA tournament. Eric Kane of VolQuest joins us next on 104.5 The Zone. So as Tennessee fans lick their wounds from the Elite Eight exit in the NCAA tournament, spring practice is nearly coming to a head in Knoxville. The spring game coming up next Saturday, April 12th at Neyland Stadium. Eric Kane of VolQuest is here to talk about it. Eric, good morning, man. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Well, before we get to the football, I know you were on hand for the Vols scrimmage on Monday at Neyland Stadium. Just in the last couple of days, what has kind of the response been from the fan base, I guess, from this loss in the Elite Eight, Houston, the way it kind of happened, and how this Tennessee team you think will be remembered?
Yeah, I mean it stinks anytime you lose the last game of the last game of the season, and it's nothing. It's not a championship. I mean, this team has got two guys that fans are going to remember for so long. It's Kyle Ziegler and Jamon Meshack. Chaz Lanier comes in and just seamlessly transitions and is everything you want him to be. And Jordan Gainey, I mean, his story's great. So this has been a fun team to watch, and it was a good team. It was a team that was worthy of being kind of on that one line at points and times. But you had a really bad half of basketball against a very, very good basketball team that resembles you in so many ways. And so it's unfortunate. There's some frustration. There's some people upset, obviously, but that's March for you.
Well, then you look at the challenge Rick Barnes has ahead of him this offseason, having to entirely flip this roster. I know you cover, obviously, Tennessee football. You cover Tennessee baseball very closely. Between the three sports, baseball, football, basketball, what to you is the most challenging and not the easiest, but which one maybe has the quickest path to getting back on track for success? Because you would think basketball has the easiest path to doing that just because of the numbers being so much smaller, but it certainly is a unique challenge. Rick Barnes hasn't had a cultural type of reset like the one he's about to see in maybe his entire tenure here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's why, last offseason is very different from this offseason. Sure, you replaced Dalton Connect and an all-SEC forward and Jonas Adu and Tobe Awaka and some others. I mean, those were big losses, huge losses. Yet you went back to the Elite Eight, and a large part because you added and you sprinkled around your backbone of the program, which is the guys Ziegler, Jamon Meshack, and kind of everything that they brought from a leadership standpoint and from a defensive standpoint. So that's why I think this reset is going to be a little bit different. You have 4 returners on your roster right now. You're adding 3 signees and 3 commits, and so that's 7. You have spots open for 6 guys, but you're kind of, I don't want to say starting from scratch because that's not accurate, but from a scoring standpoint, you pretty much are starting from scratch. And so it's going to be quite the challenge. I think basketball is, you can look at it 2 ways. I think basketball, obviously, you can hit the reset quickly and get back deep into a tournament run because of the transfer portal, but also you lose so many via graduation or the portal this time every single year. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. For football, I think it's all about getting the quarterback. I mean, Tennessee struck gold with Hendon Hooker, right? And you saw how quickly that rebuild took. And, baseball, I think, is the sport to where you really kind of you supplement via the portal. But if you're not recruiting and developing and signing elitely at the high school level, then you're not going to be a successful team that reaches Omaha year in and year out like Tennessee. So I think it's basketball, but obviously if you hit that quarterback in the transfer portal, then who knows what your ceiling can be in terms of the playoffs in football.
Naturally, one of the first questions that comes up after a season like this comes to an end is, that was Rick Barnes. Was it his best shot? I've seen that a lot. I've seen Tennessee fans saying that was the best opportunity to get to the Final Four. Where do you kind of fall on that? Whether it was this year, last year's team with Dalton Connect, even that Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield team that, lost in overtime in the Sweet 16, you feel like they had the goods to make a Final Four run. With those 3 teams, what do you feel like had the best sort of situation where they obviously all came up short of that goal eventually, but which one of those 3 do you think was in the best position maybe to do it, and was it this year's team?
It's a good question. Immediately I would think last year's team with because you had a superstar, right? You had a superstar. You had a lot of guys that played great defense. You had a good supporting cast. You had a post presence at times that it wasn't as consistent as you wanted to, but you had a scoring presence in the post for the majority of the season. So I would kind of say probably last year's team, but I think this year's team, obviously, with the way you played defense and the way that you brought the energy and the way that Chaz Lanier was going off for you in the tournament, I think this year's team obviously had a good chance too. So I would probably say last year's team, then this year's team, and then the one with Grant and Admiral kind of third in this regard. But Yeah, I think the ability to go and get experienced players, old players, kind of accelerates that process. So I think before the transfer portal era, you could very easily say, oh, man, yeah, Rick Barnes, that was his best chance. He's never going to get back there again, right, because of his age and all that. You can't really say that anymore because you truly can hit the reset button and go out there and, sign 3 or 4 players that will change your program completely in terms of win-losses. So I think he likes doing that. I think he likes this part of it. And I'm excited to see, obviously, one visitor already here this week, and I'm excited to see who he signs and what this team can look like this time next year.
Yeah, Jacoby Gillespie, the Maryland transfer, looking at Tennessee, has some experience playing here in the state right down the road at Belmont. So we'll see if that's the first step addressing the
and
guard
from
position. Go ahead.
Greenville, Tennessee. I was going to say he's from Greenville, Tennessee, too.
There you go. Eric Kane, our guest of VolQuest on 104.5 The Zone, @_Kaner on Twitter, where you can follow him. All right, so scrimmage on Monday night. Tennessee was in Neyland Stadium. I know they were back on the practice field today, but going back to Monday, what were some of the takeaways as they got in some 11-on-11 action?
Yeah, you always got to take everything with a grain of salt, right? Because it's spring. There are so many guys who are not participating, albeit just a little minor injury they're being very cautious with, or off-season procedure, or whatever the case may be. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt. But the talk coming out of scrimmage 1 was explosiveness, how they looked on the outside and the perimeter, a wide receiver. And that's what you want to hear because you've been hitting the reset at that position. No more Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Squirrel White. Those guys are gone. And it's Mike Matthews got to step up. Chris Brazel's got to step up. Braylon Staley, Rodarius Jackson, and, Travis Smith, all those guys. And the talk out of scrimmage 1 was, man, these young receivers are going to be good. And so that's what you want to hear. And, Nico, control, command, those were some phrases thrown around there by people we spoke to, and Josh Heupel. Nico just looking like he's not just taking ownership of the huddle and the offense, but taking ownership of the football team, and that's what you want to hear. So some fun talk about the offense, the throws down the field. I know I think it was Travis Smith that had a touchdown catch. That was actually from Jake Merklinger. But some good conversations coming from scrimmage 1, and excited to see what they say about scrimmage 2.
You mentioned Travis Smith there, the freshman. That would kind of buck a trend, right? In the Josh Heupel era, a true freshman having an impact at the wide receiver spot.
I mean, it would, right? And Mike Matthews should have bucked that trend last year, but, he didn't in terms of getting as much playing time as, in my opinion, he should have. But he would. But when you look at the numbers right here, Luke, like, Tennessee doesn't have a choice. I mean, we'll see if they go out and get a body from the transfer portal, wide receiver. But right now, on one side, you have Mike Matthews and Rodarius Jackson. On the other side, you have Chris Brazel and Travis Smith. In the slot, you have Braylon Staley, Amari Jefferson, and when Joakim Dawson gets here, that's where he'll be. That's it in terms of scholarship receivers. So they are going to have to play. And I think they like the makeup. I think they like the athletic ability, the talent level and all that. It's just about stacking reps and, finding some consistency. So one way or the other, that's going to buck a trend this year for sure in terms of a young wide receiver playing.
What has been the first impression of David Sanders Jr., the freshman offensive tackle, in terms of how he could stack up as a starter, as a guy that rotates in at left or right tackle? As I know he's been on campus as an early enrollee, but is really getting out there with reps for the first time in spring ball.
It's funny. I was just talking with Adam Sparks this morning, Knox News, and he asked me about David Sanders, and I'm like, I haven't really heard much about him the last couple of practices, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, you got a young, early enrollee, 5-star plus offensive tackle, top 5 player, whatever in the country. Just put your head down and go to work, and that's what he needs to do. He athletic ability jumps off the charts. You see him out there working. His footwork is phenomenal. Everybody seems to be pleased with him. When he met with the media, he's like, hey, I'm here. I got to be a sponge. I got to learn. There's so much I got to learn. It sounds like he's got the right mindset. He's not one of those guys that just walks in thinking, demanding he's going to be the starting right tackle. So all things, seem to be good in that regard. Now, yeah, he's got to get stronger. He's got to find some consistency, but so do a lot of young players. But so far, I mean, he's out there getting some extra work on the field right now. It sounds like he's got a great mindset, and obviously he's got the tools to be a really, really good football player, and he's on his way.
Eric Kane of VolQuest with us. You mentioned Nico Iamaleava, kind of the controlled nature describing his play so far in spring ball. Do you anticipate anything different about how Nico is utilized as he kind of takes on this more leadership role, ownership of the offense? Like, is there anything that we can anticipate in how Nico runs the offense in 2025 that maybe we didn't get to see as much of in 2024?
I'm intrigued to see kind of what these wrinkles are. I think every year, every coach in America has got to sit down and do a self-scout. All right, this is where I excel. This is where we can get better. This is a part of the game or part of the playbook that we didn't utilize enough. And I think Tennessee did that just like every team in America. And so I'm intrigued to see kind of what these tweaks, if you will, to the offense are going to look like. Because I think there's going to be some. Are they going to bring the splits in some? I don't know. Are they going to, have some more underneath passing? I think they should. Instead of just relying on the dig routes and the slants to find explosive plays. For Nico, what's he look like in that regard? But also I think for Nico specifically, man, I would run him. And I understand you don't want to take any unnecessary hits, but Nico is better when he gets popped a little early on. I think his legs need to be utilized. I think it adds another element to this game. I'm not talking Vince Young, Michael Vick out there, but I'm talking, on the read option, let him keep it a couple of times to keep the defense honest. And I think that's an element that you should be utilized in the offense more moving forward, and I hope it is. And maybe, Luke, because Jake Merklinger's really come along this spring, and there's a lot of confidence in the back quarterback, you can afford to take some of those chances with Nico using those legs.
Eric, I was wondering about that last year. It just felt like every time Nico Iamaleava was at his best, it was after it's strange to say, but he took a hit, right? He got roughed up a little bit. He kind of got into the flow of the game, whether it was a scramble or a designed quarterback run. And it's a weird thing to say, right? Get a couple hits on your quarterback, see if he can't get into the flow of the game. But that is kind of where I wonder how this coaching staff can adjust is how do we get Nico into the flow of a game without jeopardizing the health of our starting quarterback?
No, you're exactly right. I always thought that. And again, some guys are kind of just like that. And maybe Nico is, but also not just taking a hit or whatever, but moving him, getting him out of the pocket. I don't remember which game it was. I want to say it was Arkansas on the road, but I could be wrong. Play number 1 of the game, bootleg, rolling out to the right sideline, throwing it down the field, first down. I mean, getting him moving out of the pocket, rolling the defense. I said this since he got here, and I'm not a scout. I don't do the rankings at On3 or anything, but he is better when he's out of the pocket. He is better when he's throwing off platform. So utilize that skill set. And I don't think Tennessee has done as much as it could in that regard last year. And that's something I hope, moving forward that they do to really utilize what's a really, really good talent here at Tennessee with Nico.
Is that something that's been discussed, whether it's Josh Heupel talking to you guys, other assistant coaches, other players, or is that kind of something that you and other people among the media have talked about? It's something that you'd maybe like to see?
I think it's more, just me and some of the, people covering the team that's kind of mentioned that. We haven't brought it up to Josh Heupel or to Joey Halsley or anything this spring. Now, from week to week in the fall, that's something we could talk about. But really the conversation this spring with the coaches is, regarding Nico, getting better, leading, breaking into new wide receiver room, stuff like that.
Eric Kane of VolQuest, our guest. Eric, of the transfers to this point, the incoming transfers, who to you has stuck out the most?
Incoming transfers, the guards on the offensive line. They are going to be, and I know that's not sexy, but they're important. And when you're talking about the wide receiver room hitting the reset, the offensive line is very much hitting the reset too. And to be able to bring in 2 guards who have played so much football, Wendell Moy being one of them that played 768 snaps last year, a former all Pac-12 offensive lineman. And then Sam Pendleton, who played a lot of football for Notre Dame last year, especially in the college football playoff run. That's good. And they kind of bring a mentality, the right mindset about how to go about practicing. And they've been really good so far this spring. I feel like they've kind of seamlessly transitioned really well into that Glenn Ellerbe offensive line room. And I think they're obviously going to help keep Nico upright as well. So the 2 guards on the offensive line is who I would say, and I know that's not the glamour answer, but hey, you got to win games in the trenches, and Tennessee, I feel like has a chance to. Man, you're replacing so many good ones on the offensive line, but I think you kind of have a chance to to maybe even be better, in my opinion. We'll see how that all comes together.
One of the big storylines of spring ball going in was Ricky Gibson, right? The Tennessee corner reportedly planning to enter the transfer portal at the end of spring ball. The Jermod McCoy injury, the ACL injury, kind of hovers over all of this. So it feels like the dust has settled on that, Eric, in terms of Ricky Gibson out there practicing. Where are you on this and Ricky Gibson and his future with the program?
No, it feels like it has settled. It feels like Ricky Gibson is going to be with Tennessee. At least that's the mood here. And I know Austin Price, kind of reported that a couple of weeks ago, and that's been good. But I mean, Willie Martinez spoke to us last week, and Tim Banks spoke to us at the beginning of camp, and they said that hey, he's stepped up big time with the absence of Jermod McCoy. Not just his on-field play because he finished really, really strong last year, but leading this new group of cornerbacks, and there's not a lot of depth there, and so it's a great opportunity for some of these young freshmen to prove that, hey, you don't need to go to the transfer portal to find another body. Like, we're good, and Ricky Gibson's kind of taken ownership of that room. So it feels like Ricky Gibson is here, and he's working, and he's completely invested, and obviously that means the world because he's a very, very good player, and I think he can only get better after finishing last year really strong.
So as you guys cover spring ball, Eric, obviously over here, we have been talking about this draft ad nauseum coming up in about 3 weeks. The Titans with the #1 overall pick, but also a lot about these Tennessee players, James Pierce Jr., Dylan Sampson, what their landing spots, best fits might look like. For someone like you with boots on the ground in Knoxville, covering the recruiting side of things as well in the football program, how important is this draft specifically for Tennessee? And just overall, when you look at guys like Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, Hendon Hooker around the league that just haven't really broken through, how much importance do you place on where guys are drafted and what happens when they hit the league when it, as it relates to recruiting down the line?
Well, I mean, it's everything, right? And I mean, it's not the only thing, but gosh, it's up there. I mean, when you're a recruit, you want to go to a winning program. You want to go somewhere that, I mean, one of the first things they ask or, they sit down, they look up whenever a team's, approaching them is, who's my position coach? How many players has he gotten drafted? And the track record speaks for itself for guys, like Rodney Gardner and some of these other coaches that are here at Tennessee. But also, I mean, if you have a guy like James Pierce that could potentially be a first-round pick, and I know this offseason, man, he was being talked about as a top 10 pick. I know Pro Football Focus was talking about him being their #1 player on the board, and I know he's fallen a little bit since then, but I mean, you got an opportunity to have a first-round pick, and you took that out there. I mean, that is your flex on the recruiting trail for sure. So it is very important, and these guys having success in the league, as you kind of pointed out, nobody's really kind of broken through just yet, but Byron Young's a guy that you absolutely point to on the defensive side of the football. Lante Taylor, Theo Jackson. Offensively, Darnell Wright, top 10 pick, but you hope some of those receivers kind of break through. Maybe Dylan Sampson can be at that in this class, but it is very important. So all eyes, on the NFL draft and, of course, Pro Day that was here a couple of weeks ago.
Eric, last thing for you is Tennessee baseball comes off the win over Tennessee Tech yesterday, the sweep of South Carolina over the weekend. Obviously a red-hot start, a flying start to the season, the #1 team in the country. How does this team right now in terms of strengths and weaknesses compare when you put it side by side with that national championship winning team last year?
Oh, man. It's unfair. It's unfair to compare any team to that team that won the national championship, especially the way they ended. But, no, I mean, this is a different team, right? And it feels like they're still very much trying to figure out themselves and figure out, who fits what role the best. They got a lot of fight to them, and that's something that's consistent with the team last year and the teams here under Tony Vitello. That game on Saturday at South Carolina, really all weekend, South Carolina just wouldn't go away. And, on paper, that's not a good baseball team. That just kind of goes to show you the strength of the Southeastern Conference. But this team just won't go away. They got a whole lot of fight. They got a whole lot of want to. And they got a whole lot of, I guess, swag is the way you can phrase it. Not like the 2022 team. Nobody can ever touch that team. But, Andrew Fisher, Liam Doyle, they definitely brought it, additions via the portal. And, Dean Curley is very much, he's not just that freshman that's in the lineup anymore. I mean, Dean Curley is a dude for this team. And you have guys emerge, like, a strong freshman class, Jay Abernathy and Braden Krenzel and Tegan Coons on the weekend. So it's been a whole lot of fun. I think there were more star power because there were more older guys that were, fixtures in the lineup with Burke and Moore and, Kavaris Tears and so on and so forth. But the talent level is through the roof here, and I'm excited to see, is that what they look like continuing on through SEC play. But so far, so good. An 8-1 record and 27-2 overall, I believe.
He is Eric Kane, does a great job covering Tennessee athletics for VolQuest.com and hosts the Locked on Vols daily podcast. Be sure to go subscribe. Eric, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you.
Hey, thank you guys.
Eric Kane with us on 104.5 The Zone, on Twitter @_Kaner. So, spring practice continues on, about 10 more days left of it. Tennessee obviously out of the men's and women's NCAA tournament, but the SEC remains trying to claim a title after what has been the best season to this point in SEC basketball history. And there is some news around the Southeastern Conference in the sport of basketball as well. We'll get to it with the SEC observations coming up next. Friends, if you're new to Nashville or you've been here a long time, odds are you've got a clean-out project that the missus would love to see done by the spring. Well, guess what? It's April. We are in the thick of spring, and the most reliable folks I know that can help you today are the folks over at J&J Services. For over 20 years, J&J Services have been providing dumpsters for local businesses, construction sites, home cleanouts, and demolitions. They provide commercial dumpster service for your favorite restaurants and convenience stores. They provide roll-off dumpster service for everyone from 60-story high-rises to your neighbor's farm. J&J Services can offer trash compactors, making those large loads a little bit smaller. They can even supply you with porta potties for your special event. For the safest, most reliable service that you can get in Middle Tennessee, call them today for a free quote at 615-599-7778. J&J Services, where they always keep it trashy. And then there were two. The SEC, starting with 14 teams in the men's NCAA tournament, and two will face off for a spot in the national championship game coming up this weekend in San Antonio for the Final Four. Auburn taking on Florida, a Final Four made up of all one seeds. First time that's happened since 2008. It'll be the second meeting between the two this season. Florida was the first team to knock off Auburn in SEC play, and they did it down on the Plains, 90-81. That was back on February 7th. Janai Broome, 18 points, 11 assists that day. Had an injury scare in the Elite Eight, went crashing down, kind of limped back to the locker room to get x-rays. The Auburn lead over Michigan State in a little bit of a tenuous spot. You could feel the tension in that Auburn-heavy Atlanta crowd. And then Janai Broome came trotting out to a hero's welcome and finished out the game. Auburn's depth also has just shown out in spades all year long, whether or not their best player is in the lineup. So Auburn taking on Florida for a spot in the championship game. Obviously, the winner will play either Duke or Houston. On the women's side, you've got a similar situation. Texas and South Carolina, the 2-1 seeds going head-to-head in the Final Four for a spot in the championship to play either UConn or UCLA. The women's Final Four, both games happening on Friday, on the men's side on Saturday. You can catch that right here on 104.5 The Zone, courtesy of Westwood One, coverage starting at 4 o'clock on Saturday for the men's Final Four. So the SEC is looking for its first champion since 2012. Kentucky, John Calipari. It has been a while. Before that, you got to go to the Florida back-to-back teams under Billy Gillispie. Billy Gillispie, what did I just say? Billy Donovan, excuse me. Ross is back there, noted Duke fan Ross, who today is wearing his Tennessee orange. In fact, everybody here is wearing Tennessee gear, except for myself, the Tennessee alum. Robert is wearing a Vols Rifleman polo, and we've got Ross wearing a Tennessee T-shirt. Noted Duke fan, Ross Johnston. Ross, is that a shot? Is that out of celebration that you don't have to face Tennessee in the Final Four? Where's this Tennessee fanhood coming from at this point?
It's a really nice shirt. I really just like the shirt. It was more in remembrance for you of this Elite Eight run that the Vols just went on back-to-back years making the Elite Eight, which is pretty impressive for the Tennessee program. But I knew it was going to be a tough week for you this week after the abomination against Houston.
Abomination is right from a shooting perspective. As a Duke fan, which team, Florida or Auburn, that was jarring. Which team would you rather see in the championship game?
That's a tough question. I think Florida is probably the better team right now, but it is hard to beat a team twice. Obviously, we beat Auburn back in Cameron earlier in the season. I don't really know. I mean, I feel confident with how we're playing right now, so I guess the easy way out is I'm cool with whoever they would play, but obviously got to beat Houston first. But I think they match up better against Auburn probably because Florida's a pretty big team too, and Duke's size bothers a lot of teams.
And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
Really trying to make this Stone Cold thing happen with Ross.
That's all I hear, dude. It's all I hear every time he talks.
Ross, were you a WWE fan growing up? Are you familiar with the work of Stone Cold Steve Austin?
I can't say I am, but I do know the why because I watch McAfee a lot. And, whiskey, beer, more whiskey, all that good stuff.
So you think you'd rather see Auburn just for the fact that you've already played them once and Florida is the best team right now in the tournament? Or is that not what you were saying?
I was saying I honestly don't really care. But, yeah, probably Auburn just because of how we match up. I just do think it's tough to beat a team twice. Also, I think Cooper Flagg's already kind of locked up the National Player of the Year. But if they beat Auburn in the championship, then that would also kind of solidify that as well.
Robert, as an ACC truther, do you feel like the SEC has to win the national championship this year with all of the talk about the conference throughout the course of the season? No,
they don't have to. They just have to win it if you don't want me to talk crap. If you don't want me to talk junk about your conference, then, yeah, they need to win it. But also, I don't get where this tribalism is coming from SEC members. Yeah. Oh, we're the best Who gives a crap? Who cares if y'all are the best Where's your team at? Where's this team at? Where's anybody's team at? Don't nobody in the ACC, don't nobody in the Pac-12, Big 12, Big 10, Big Mama's house, don't nobody care about what their conference looks like except so y'all are excited when Vanderbilt wins. y'all are excited when Ole Miss wins. Who gives a damn about what the conference is doing? It's just another bragging, right? Just another braggadocious thing for y'all to hang, another medal for you to hang on your jacket of collegiate sports to say, oh, look, we're the best at this, we're the best at this. But, who is the king of swimming now? Ask Katie Ledecky. Ask Michael Phelps, who the real ACC legend Katie Ledecky. Ask him who the real swimming champs are. Even though I saw the Vols did pretty well in their swim meet.
Yeah, they have a good swim program. SEC fans, when it comes to the tribalism and the SEC pride side of things, it's very much like siblings, right? Like you have a contentious relationship with your sibling, especially when you're a kid. But it's the thing where I can say that, you can't say that. You can hate and root against every other team in the SEC, but you're also going to take some pride out of the fact that it's the best conference this year in college basketball, that it typically is in college football. I hate the SEC chant. Like, I'm not about that. At the Outback Bowl, right, if, Ole Miss beats Louisville or something in whatever tax layer bowl and an SEC chant starts to break out in the stadium, I kind of cringe a little bit as somebody that typically roots against SEC programs. That's my direct competition. I don't want you to be good at things. I don't want you to be attractive to recruits. I don't want you to have NIL money. But at the same time, it's sort of a point of pride. It's this weird sort of juxtaposition where you say, well, you have this pride that it is the best conference in that respective sport, and which just makes your accomplishments look better, right? Like if you win 25 games in the SEC this season in college basketball, it's more impressive than it was in years past because of the product that the SEC is. So it's a weird tightrope to walk.
So Lucas, I have a question for you, and I think I know the answer, but I still think it's an interesting question. So as a Tennessee fan, say that one of these two SEC teams in the Final Four is going to win the title. Would you rather it be Florida or Auburn? Obviously, Florida, a much more bitter rival for the Vols than Auburn, but Auburn and their head coach, Bruce Pearl, used to wear the orange and white. So that would also, I would imagine, be a little tough if he's cutting down the nets in San Antonio.
Oh, man, that's an impossible question that you've asked. I want it to be either Duke or Houston. I want it to be Houston because if it's Houston, I win my bracket pool. But that's not the question you're asking me. Yeah, Florida is one of Tennessee's biggest rivals in basketball, and I mean, obviously across all sports. And Tennessee fans do have this thing with Bruce Pearl. Even though the success has been great under Rick Barnes, without question to me, is the best head coach, most accomplished coach in the history of Tennessee men's basketball. Like it's not close. But at the same time, you watch Bruce do these things that he wishes he could have done at Tennessee if it didn't end the way it did. He obviously already has a Final Four appearance. Oh, man, it's an impossible question. Like, I still like Bruce Pearl. I like seeing Bruce have success, but I do have this weird thing for Auburn. Like, I grew up in Birmingham. A bunch of my friends went to Auburn. I've always gotten a weird vibe from Auburn. Never really loved Auburn sports and the way they do. You know, my biggest thing when I'm contentious with fan bases, the thing that gives me the ick, you know, people say something gives you the ick, is when a fan base has a chant that is gibberish. You know what I mean? Do either of you know what I'm talking about? Like, what comes to mind when I say that?
I'm not sure. What'd you say?
Okay.
Bert was playing some sound back here.
Stop it. Don't you blame it on me.
When a fan base, you know, every fan base has their own chants and songs and stuff. Some have chants that, like, aren't English. They're gibberish. Like, Ole Miss does hotty toddy, gosh almighty, who the hell are we? Flim flam bim bam. Like that, the flim flam bim bam to me. I'm just throwing my arms up. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about?
No, that doesn't upset me.
Auburn does
LSU's got a pretty catchy chant.
Yeah, they do. It's certainly not gibberish. Auburn does the Badageta, where they do this Badageta ba ra 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 sis kumbah. Like, you're just making sounds. It just makes sense. Be serious for 1 second and say some words.
Okay, yeah, that'd probably tick me off, but not enough to filibuster about it.
Yeah.
I also understand
got a lot
you probably
of Auburn
have
fans in Nashville listening to this.
Just throw them under the bus.
I'm going to make Don mad, too, is being pointed out to me in the F&M Bank chat. Anyway, there is some news in the world of the SEC as Texas A&M head coach Buzz Williams is moving out of the conference. He took the Maryland job. He's replacing Kevin Willard, who is off to Villanova. Buzz Williams, 120-73 in his 6 years at A&M, 3 straight NCAA tournament appearances. Obviously, was the coach at Marquette and Virginia Tech. Before that, I think Maryland upgraded here. I think Maryland just hired a more accomplished coach than the one that left to take the Villanova job, which obviously is a big job. One thing I do like about Buzz Williams, good coach, but he keeps the three-piece suit alive on the sideline as more and more coaches move towards the quarter zip. Do you think you guys would wear a suit or go quarter zip if you were a college basketball
I wouldn't
coach?
be wearing nothing.
I know.
I'd be wearing the least amount of clothes. I'd be wearing a team-issued, what we can't call them wife beaters no more. What do we call them now?
You'd be barefoot.
I would be barefoot. I'd be wearing a sleeveless white tank with the logo of my school. I'd be wearing some chubby shorts. Dude, I wouldn't be wearing nothing.
I agree with you. I would be wearing something, but I don't think I'd be wearing a three-piece suit. But I can still respect it. Great hire. And the noise right now around the Texas A&M job is maybe Chris Beard, according to On3 Sports, the Ole Miss head coach. So that'd be an interesting intra-conference hire by the Aggies. We know they have the money to do it. Do we have things to give away for the dumbest thing in sports this week?
We do. We got a pair of tickets to go to see Nashville SC 10 days from now take on Salt Lake City.
All right. That is next Saturday at Geodis Park against Real Salt Lake. Come check it out. This team is fun. This team is scoring goals. And if you want to be in the building next Saturday, all you got to do is call us 615-737-1045. The best submission for the dumbest thing in sports this week will head to Geodis Park next Saturday. That's next on 1045 The Zone. Hey guys, Lucas here. Speaking of Nashville Soccer Club, if you can't make it out to Geodis Park or you want to go somewhere to watch the game this Saturday when the team is in Charlotte with some other Nashville SC fans, head to Fog Street Lawn Club, Nashville's premier soccer pub. It's your go-to spot to watch the boys in gold. It's also open early for Premier League soccer, even those 6 a.m. kickoffs with a nice brunch. You can sit up on that incredible rooftop, watch the sunrise, and I'm telling you, it is the best view of downtown Nashville on a rooftop you will find. Trust me, you got to go and find out for yourself. But no matter the sport, Fog Street Lawn Club, whether it's the Final Four this weekend, the Masters coming up, they make sure you won't miss a moment. A ton of space, a ton of TVs, and you'll never get bored. Play lawn bowling upstairs on that picturesque rooftop. Go downstairs, challenge your friends to some axe throwing with Bad Axe, which is sitting right next door. Located near the Gulch in the upcoming Pytown neighborhood, it gives you the experience of downtown Nashville, but you get to avoid all the craziness, the hustle and bustle of Broadway. Take the family out there. It's a great spot. Be sure to check out Happy Hour with their awesome British pub-style food menu Monday through Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. And go check them out. Fog Street Lawn Club, located on Fog Street. It is 11:02. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. NFL owners' meetings are over in West Palm Beach. The vote to ban the tush push was the headline going in, and that vote was tabled. Discussions on it will continue. Owners will reconvene during spring meetings in May. The Nashville Predators lost a fourth straight last night, 8-4 against the Blue Jackets. 7 games left in the regular season. They'll visit Dallas tomorrow. And the Titans made a signing yesterday. Veteran cornerback and special teamer Justin Hardy on a 1-year deal. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone. (615-737-1045) is how you jump in. The best submission gets a family 4-pack of tickets to check out the Nashville SC game next Saturday, April 12th, against Real Salt Lake at Geodis Park. The boys in gold, 6 currently in the Eastern Conference, headed to Charlotte on Saturday before coming back home for that matchup next Saturday. You can be there if you give us the best submission. I'll start the bidding here with a recurring guest on The Dumbest Thing in Sports this week, Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, who spoke at NFL owners meetings about the NFLPA survey that comes out every year in February that grades every aspect of a franchise, right? From team travel to the cafeteria to how family members are treated to relationship with the head coach, all the way up to ownership. Players are submitting these surveys, and the NFLPA puts it out every year. Woody Johnson, unsurprisingly, got an F in this NFLPA survey, Jets players surveying their own owner. He was asked about it down in West Palm Beach, and here's the quote from the Jets owner. "My first thought was, it's totally bogus." He added, this is from Connor Hughes of SNY TV, Woody Johnson added that he still wants to improve and that he's always focused on improvement, but not, quote, because of this bogus report. Like some blogger in New Jersey threw something on the internet, rating Woody Johnson, grading him an F as an NFL owner. No, man, this was your own team. This was players in your building going through the NFLPA saying what they think of you. So not a bogus report, maybe something you should take a little bit more seriously rather than calling it something that just popped up on the internet somewhere. Woody Johnson, the dumbest thing in sports this week.
For my dumbest thing in sports, I've got to go with one reporter from owners' meetings who made quite the wave on social media, kind of like he would if he jumped in a pool. I don't know if you guys have seen this guy, Mark Cabali from owners' meetings. He covers the Pittsburgh Steelers, and at owners' meetings, he was sitting at the table. He got the most prized spot, sitting right next to Mike Tomlin, and what was he doing? Was he asking informative questions? Was he perhaps pondering Aaron Rodgers coming to town? No, he was napping. He was falling asleep. And him and Tomlin had a couple good back and forths during the availability. Later in the interview, Cabali said, "Yeah, me and DK are kind of similar. Both of us like to eat candy bars." And Mike Tomlin hit him with, "Yeah, you wear it differently." I enjoyed that, but I did want to play for you Cabali's statement on accusations that he fell asleep during the Tomlin interview.
Can we get a comment on?
I was not sleeping. I was not sleeping. I was. If you look, I strategically placed my phone to tape Mike Tomlin. And I was only hitting it when he said something interesting. And maybe the eyes got a little droopy at the time. But I say I was not sleeping.
Yeah, Didn't he sound like a kid who got in trouble in class? I was not sleeping. I was sitting strategically resting my eyes. And also, what a slap in the face to Tomlin. Like, I was only hitting record when he said something interesting. Like, as if you were the beacon of interesting. How about you roll on the whole thing and we'll decide afterwards, buddy? Mark Cabali, my dumbest thing in sports.
You wear it differently is such a good line. Mike Tomlin's just an absolute artist with these things, man. That is so good.
Donkey Kong uppercut up.
But you know what? I want to give Kubali the benefit of the doubt here. As somebody that has trouble, like, I'm not a napper. I'm not one of these people that can fall asleep. If I'm in a setting like that next to an NFL head coach, surrounded by reporters, the hustle and bustle of owners' meetings, falling asleep seems insane to me. But that's also just me. Like, I really can't sleep unless I'm in my bed at nighttime. I'm one of those people. And I believe him that he got caught in a droopy moment and is looking at his phone to hit record. Maybe that's just the way his face looks when he looks down. It looked like he was sleeping. He's got his head resting on his right fist as well. But maybe just because I'm one of those people that has trouble falling asleep like that in the middle of the day, just with the snap of a finger, I want to give him benefit of the doubt.
I want you to give the benefit of the doubt in this hypothetical scenario to a Buck Rising. If Buck was sitting next to Brian Callahan and there was a picture of him drooling with his eyes closed, would we give him the benefit of the doubt? No. You're in owners meeting weekend. You get a free trip to Palm Beach to hang out. Like, what are you doing sleeping, dude? I would never let this dude go on the road again. Oh, this isn't interesting enough for you? Anyway, I've slandered Pittsburgh media way too much today. I'll move on. Ross,
do you have a submission?
Yes, I do. And the Caboli thing was A+, by the way, Bert. I mean, that dude was dreaming about candy bars. Mine, I know I've done a lot of March Madness, but I got to stick with it. Everybody complaining about the Final Four being all one seeds. Just stop. When Ken Pom came out, which was in 1996, I believe, since its birth, all these 4 teams in the Final Four are in the top 10 of the all-time Ken Pom ratings. We have the best 4 teams in the country. Obviously, I get if you're upset that your team didn't make it, that's a different thing. But if you're complaining about, there's no 11 seed or 12 seed in here, or like an 8 seed that would get absolutely smoked by any of these 4 teams, you're dumb. And I don't want to hear that. I don't want to deal with it. We're about to have 3 really good games this next weekend, and we're about to see the best players in college basketball take the floor. Keep in mind, with Flagg, Broome, and Clayton, we're probably watching the best 3 players in the country this year as well. So I can't stand it. I want to see good basketball on Saturday and Monday night, and I think we're going to get that.
Love a Cinderella, but I'm with you, man. I'm excited for this weekend, even though my Tennessee Vols fell short. All right, to the phones for your chance to win tickets to Nashville SC's home game against Real Salt Lake next Saturday at Geodis Park, April 12th. Remember to stay on hold after you give your submission, or else you will lose your chance. Robert and Dixon up first. Hey, Robert.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me good?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think the dumbest thing in sports this week is the NFL pretending that they're going to keep chain gangs as a backup for this video system. They might for this season or something, but why are you going to have the expense? I'm sure those guys, I know they don't make as much as the referees, but they make something. The expense of these guys out there pretending to still do that. And I'll tell you this, I did it for JV games many, many years ago. It's a lot of work. I'm sure not going to go volunteer to do it for an NFL team, and I don't think they're going to pay enough to make it worthwhile, and probably shouldn't. They could have done this 25 or 30 years ago. It's just the sports tradition thing. My wife always said, why are they still doing that? They don't have to do that, and they don't. And they're not going to keep those guys in that totally unnecessary role for very long.
Thanks for the call, Robert. I mean, it's a backup, right? That's what it is at this point. I don't think the NFL is worried about sparing that expense. And I don't know. I mean, there could be some hiccups with this technology to help spotting the football. It's a good thing. It's been a long time coming. But I would like to have some sort of backup plan in place if something goes wrong with that technology. Otherwise, what are you doing? Plucking a couple folks from the stands and asking them to be the chain gang? Eric is up next in Springfield. Hey, Eric.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks for taking my call. So mine is going to be from the Kentucky and A&M baseball game that happened Sunday. So Kentucky was up 10-5 in the bottom of the 8th inning. The game was pretty much wrapped up, but there was a kind of a unique thing that was going on in this game. With it being a Sunday game and Kentucky was the away team, there was a curfew called. So no new inning could start in the SEC in that specific game after 4:30 Central Time. And Kentucky knew this as it was about 4:25 at the start of the 8th inning. So they started doing everything in their power, stalling, doing whatever they could to get past 4:30 and then get, the final out and end the game. Well, A&M was pissed at that, and so it got a heated exchange. Coaches were chewing each other out. They got on the field, pissed. Almost led to a fight, but I mean, technically they were going by the rules. But I don't know. If I was an A&M fan, I would be super mad about that. So that's sort of my dumbest thing in sports this week.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Eric. A good submission. Jason in Murfreesboro up next. Hey, Jason.
Hey guys, for me, it's clearly the thing. I guess it happened Sunday night with the Timberwolves and the Pistons. That right there was like the dumbest thing in sports for me. Just how man, y'all. The fight and everything going into the stands, and it's just like, are we going back to that one game with the Pacers? I guess like, how much further are we going to get in with these fights?
Yeah, thanks for the call, Jason. That was wild. Did you see this, Robert?
No, I missed it.
This altercation. I know Dante DiVincenzo was involved, but the T-Wolves and Pistons going head to head. I mean, second quarter, and I obviously wasn't watching this game, so I don't know if it was something that was kind of brewing beforehand, but there's just kind of a common foul under the bucket, and then there's pushing and shoving. Next thing you know, the handheld camera under the bucket is being knocked over on the broadcast, and this fight is spilling into the sideline. It's this giant mob. I mean, not quite Malice at the Palace vibes, but yeah, it was definitely reminiscent of some of those 90s NBA moments. Mike in Nashville's up next. Hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. So speaking of the Timberwolves, man, my dumbest thing in sports is Russell Westbrook last night. With 10 seconds left, he kind of just threw the game away. He got the ball with like 9 seconds and blew a fast break layup, and then proceeded to foul Alexander Walker with 0.1 second on the clock to lose the game, and to sell Jokic 60-point triple-double. That was crazy to me. And an honorable mention, B.T. Johnson, toxic relationship with Ohio State and South Carolina.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Mike. It's a good submission. I think that might be the winner. Russell Westbrook, disastrous sequence at the end of that Minnesota-Denver game. Double overtime, and Denver ends up getting the win. It does award Jokic a win with that monster performance, but I think Mike should win the tickets there with that sequence by Russell Westbrook. All right, Mike, you are headed to Geodis Park next Saturday, April 12th, to watch Nashville SC host Real Salt Lake. When we come back, Matt Harmon of Yahoo Sports, he hosts a podcast called Reception Perception and has some really interesting work and analytics surrounding the wide receiver position. We'll talk to him about some of the Titans wide receiver options in free agency and the draft. That's next on 104.5 The Zone. So one of the more interesting position groups in this draft has to be the wide receiver position. All the fluctuation at the very top of it with Ted McMillan and Luther Burden and now Matthew Golden in the mix after his combine performance, just how those guys are going to fall, where the run is going to start after Travis Hunter, and what options might be there for the Titans, who have a huge need at wide receiver on days 2 and 3. That's why we got Matt Harmon on the show at Matt Harmon _BYB, football writer and analyst for Yahoo Sports, the creator of a really interesting method of evaluation for receivers called reception perception. It's a podcast of its own as well, a really interesting perspective on the wide receiver position specifically. And Matt, really appreciate the time and the perspective here as we're about 3 weeks out from the draft. So close, but so far. Appreciate you joining us.
It does feel so close, but so far. That is always what this time of year feels like to me because, I'm still obviously playing catch up on this class. Like, to me, I don't get started on the prospects until usually, obviously, certainly once the NFL regular season ends. And really now is when I'm doing most of the work on it. So, yeah, it feels far away in terms of like, okay, the exhausting news cycle, everything like that. But I'm still trying to get every minute I can to get as much data, as much reception perception charting on these prospects. So I'm really excited to talk with you guys today.
Well, I go back to what Kyle Shanahan said about when they traded up to draft Trey Lance and how he admitted that he overthought that process, that he was in on Mac Jones and let himself talk himself into going up for Trey Lance. So you say you need every minute you can get, but I'm just curious, is there a point where you kind of have to just put up a barrier and say, okay, if I continue past this point, then I'm just going to start going back and second guessing and doing things that will take me away from some of my instincts on these guys?
Well, that's why I really love, it sounds weird to say that about something that I created. So, I'm very self-aware that this is going to sound ridiculous to say, but this is why I love reception perception, and the process of it is that the standard for all of these players when enough film is available is an 8-game sample. So once we get to that 8 games and once everything is checked off, like, the data is the data. There's no going back and saying like, okay, can I get another game in to maybe see more reps against man coverage? Like at some point, and honestly, I've gotten feedback from people that have worked for teams and, currently work for teams. It's like, 8 games is more than a lot of our scouts are filing reports on. So, I do think there's a tendency to, I guess it's always great to discuss with other people, your findings and your thoughts and to say, hey, like, did you see this or did you notice this? And, sometimes I think you can have too many of those conversations and then you do start kind of going in that circle with a player. But again, from a process standpoint, this is why I've always kind of kept the charting the same ever since I came up with the idea 12 years ago, to be able to not just compare each player within himself, but also to previous guys, positional archetypes and everything of that nature.
So as you've gone through this prospect with this wide receiver draft class specifically, who is the guy that, I don't want to say you've changed your opinion most on since the start of the pre-draft process, but maybe as you've gotten deeper into the metrics and the specific way that you do it has kind of risen above the rest in a way that maybe you didn't anticipate?
Oh, it's got to be Travis Hunter. And I know he's obviously a guy who might not play full-time wide receiver in the NFL, but, I don't watch college football during the season. I know who Travis Hunter is, of course, wins the Heisman. I'm familiar with the story of it all, but going to the process, I didn't really know like what type of wide receiver he would be. I knew that he was a two-way player. He was very productive as a wide receiver. But, I was kind of curious because coming to the process, like I said, post-NFL season and everything, kind of the general consensus with him was a guy that would, he'd be a cornerback first and would moonlight as a wide receiver. And I think that's easier for us to conceptualize, right? Like the full-time cornerback and then part-time wide receiver. I think it's a little weirder to think about it the other way. He's going to be a full-time, wide receiver and then come in and play defensive back on third downs and man up on a number one. It just gets a little trickier, I think. All that being said, so I come into the process with kind of like a clear perspective on what he is as a receiver. I was blown away by his film as a receiver. 97th percentile success rate versus zone coverage and reception perception. 97th percentile success rate versus press. He really reminds me a lot of like prime Odell Beckham from a reception perception standpoint, like a full field separator, maybe a little bit loose as a route runner, but great off the line of scrimmage, incredible, truly rare ball skills. skills and ability, like just catching ability. And he also has an explosiveness after the catch to really, like, just like prime OBJ, like I said, take a quick in-breaker and house it. So I came into this not knowing if we would get a tier 1, like, to me, a guy that you can take in the top 10 and he's ready made to start in the NFL. That's what a tier 1 wide receiver prospect is to me. I wasn't sure if we'd get one of those in this class. And obviously Hunter might not be that because he's potentially going to be a two-way player. But I think he shows the traits and the potential as a prospect to be that type of guy in the NFL if he does focus solely on wide receiver.
Yeah, we've had to kind of catch ourselves on this show, Matt, when we're talking about wide receiver 1 and we're starting the conversation with Tent McMillan and Luther Burden. Right. And then it's like, no. But wide receiver 1 here is Travis Hunter. But you're right, it depends so heavily on where he lands and how they utilize him. But Travis Hunter, kind of aside, it's such a specific, unique situation there where you almost put him in a category by himself. When you look at the 3 of Tent McMillan, Luther Burden, and Matthew Golden, of those 3, who do you think would be more likely to fall into the top of the second round, as the team here in Nashville and the Titans obviously have a huge need that could very well be addressed there at the top of the second round?
Yeah, and by the way, I love that idea of them taking Cam Ward first overall and then coming back with a wide receiver at the top of the second round. It's not too dissimilar to what the Bengals did with Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. And obviously, Brian Callahan is familiar with that situation, former offensive coordinator with the Bengals, current Titans head coach. Everybody knows that. Like, that's a very clear roadmap for them to go down. And I will say, I don't necessarily, unless those guys that you mentioned slip, I don't necessarily see a guy that's in the T. Higgins caliber as a prospect, like in kind of that range of players. But that being said, like, if one of those guys was to slip that you mentioned there, I think Tent McMillan goes in the first round, whether he ends up actually being a top 10 pick or if he does tumble down a little bit. I think he ultimately still goes in the first round. I think Matthew Golden's got a great shot to be the first receiver off the board. There's so much buzz and so many people connecting him with the Dallas Cowboys, and I actually think that's a great fit. I can really see how they would use him well with what I think Brian Schottenheimer wants to do. Ultimately, I think those 2 guys are first-round locks. I think the next 2 players on the board, now I rate Emeka Egbuka as the second receiver in this draft. If he's there at the top of the second round for the Tennessee Titans, he's not like that perimeter ball winner, like a true X receiver, which is kind of what I think they need alongside Calvin Ridley. But he is a incredible slot receiver. He's great against zone coverage. I think he just immediately comes in and day one is ready to start as your flanker slot option. Like I said, it's not a perfect complement with Calvin Ridley, who I think is a flanker that they want to kind of move around the formation. They probably want like a true big X receiver. But again, I think he is a guy that I think is a clear-cut first-round pick and is my second receiver in this draft class. Luther Burden, I think, has a shot to go in the second round because there are people concerned with off-the-field kind of questions about him and things of that nature. He's also kind of I think he's the most confusing evaluation in this class because he shows you really high potential as a man coverage beating player, but he was almost exclusively a slot receiver. He got a lot of like gadgety touches. I think again, if you're grading to the flashes with Luther Burden, he shows you enough to be like I think more than just a slot receiver. It's just, is he going to put the full work in to kind of become that guy in the NFL? That's the biggest question with him. So I think if I was to put like odds on it, I think he has the highest odds to be available of the guys that we've talked about so far at the Titans' first pick in the second round.
Talking with Matt Harmon of Yahoo Sports, the creator of Reception Perception. You can subscribe, listen to the podcast. Also follow it on Twitter at Recep Perception, where you can find that handle. So let's say Luther Burden's off the board, Matthew Golden, Tent McMillan, those sort of top 3 guys outside of Travis Hunter are off the board when the Titans pick comes around. And you look at the needs this team has when it comes to edge, receiver, and then at that point, maybe you're into the best available mode as the Titans try to fill out this roster that has a great many needs, Matt. In terms of a guy that could complement Calvin Ridley, that sort of fits the framework of what you were talking about there, what is then the next phase, the next tier of wide receivers? And do you think it's plausible to dip into that tier rather than take a best available edge if you're the Titans and somebody you like has fallen down out of the first round?
Yeah, and again, if we're strictly thinking about the type of receiver that I think fits well with Calvin Ridley. Like, I think DeAndre Hopkins was that guy. I also thought like Nick Westbrook-Akina kind of became that guy for the Titans. Now, you want to shoot a little higher, I think, than Nick Westbrook-Akina if you're taking a guy like in the top of the second round, really in like day 2 of the draft. But it's that true X receiver that can be more of a vertical threat. Like, I think Trey Harris out of Ole Miss fits this group. I'm not sure if I have the complete conviction on Trey Harris to say like he would be a locked in second round pick for me, but there are people that like him a lot. And he's a guy that, I mean, you hear this a lot about college prospects, like, oh, they only run like a small handful of routes. Well, Trey Harris actually only runs like a small handful of routes. Over 55% of the routes I've charted so far for Trey Harris are go, curl, and screen. Like, coming out of that Ole Miss offense, it's very stripped down. At the same time, though, he shows you flashes of being more of a full field man coverage beating receiver at that size and being able to win against man coverage. Yeah, he fits that X receiver prototype. I also think, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, the best parts of his game were really I think the ball placement on go routes to a guy like Trey Harris. I just have much more conviction that Cam Ward can access more of that than a guy like Jackson Dart. So to me, Trey Harris, if we're looking for that big X receiver, I think he probably is kind of in that range. If we're going down a little bit further, Alec Aomanor out of Stanford is another guy that I'm a little bit all over the place on because he has the requisite size, and I think, man, he can beat man coverage as well. But he kind of is a little bit. He's loose at the catch point. He struggles with like consistently catching the ball in tight coverage, where I think a guy like Harris is much better at that. So he might be, to me, more of like a third round option. If we go that best player available a little earlier, he's more round 3 type to me than a round 2 player. But I do think those are kind of the names that we're looking at if we're talking about bigger X receivers. And that's kind of the compliment that I want with Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, because right now, Matt, you look at that wide receiver room, it's Calvin Ridley, and then you go down to Van Jefferson. Right? You go down to Treylon Burks, who hasn't been available or productive for this team since he was drafted. You go down to Mason Kinsey, Bryce Oliver, undrafted free agents. And the Titans obviously spent a lot of resources in beefing up the offensive line in front of who we presume to be Cam Ward this coming season. I'm just fascinated for an expert and someone who is as passionate about the wide receiver position as you are when it comes to the metric of measuring a young quarterback between pass protection and an array of weaponry for him to get the ball to. What ends up as a higher priority for you, somebody that studies the wide receiver position so closely?
Yeah, first of all, just because you mentioned the name Treylon Burks, he's a great lesson in terms of scouting prospects. For me, he coming into the draft, right, even before he was a Tennessee Titan, it was, well, look at his frame. He looks like A.J. Brown. He didn't play like A.J. Brown. Like, he did not have the route running ability. Like, you can be as big and theoretically fast as you want, but if you're not tight on the technical part of the position, which I think A.J. was always super underrated on, not to dig the knife and for Titans fans here any further than it needs to be.
That's all the way in,
yeah, how much farther can it go? I mean, just again, like that was they look the same, they don't play the same. Like, Treylon Burks to me was a guy that always looked like a player who should kick into the slot, even though he had the size to be more of an outside player. He looked much more of like a Juju Smith-Schuster power slot player in terms of his reception perception profile. And frankly, he just has never gotten the chance to play that position. So I think obviously he was a letdown of a draft pick. I just don't think the vision was there for him either. So when we're looking at guys in this year's class, I think Jaden Higgins fits in that group, big receiver that probably could kick into the slot. But to your question about what's more of a priority, as much as I'm the wide receiver guy, I think that we don't need to look back any further than last year's number 1 overall pick to say that putting together a better pass protection plan, and I would say a passing game that's well designed with concepts that make sense off of each other is so much more important for a young quarterback's development than giving them a bunch of options out on the route. Not everybody agrees with this. I almost kind of think that the Bears gave Caleb Williams too many options last year, especially when you've got 2 former Pro Bowl receivers in Keenan Allen and DJ Moore who have a level of expectation of how much volume they are going to get and how involved they're going to be in the offense. And then you take, to me, one of the best receivers in last year's draft class, and Rome Odunze at the 9th overall pick. there's just not there's not enough footballs to go around. There's not enough points to be scored for all three of those guys to be satisfied. And then you also have a tight end that you've given a second contract to in Cole Kmet. So at some point you get a lot of egos in the room as well. And I'm not even saying egos to be a negative thing. These guys are all great players. They should have that level of ego about themselves. You could tell there was some discontent in that wide receiver room last year, which to me, I think you're then putting more pressure on your young quarterback when there's already so much pressure on the first overall pick coming in to save the franchise and all of that stuff. So to me, I really like what the Titans have done. Yeah, you want more options than currently what they have. No question about it if you're taking Cam Ward first overall, which we all assume they are going to do. However, I think giving him an offensive line that it could at least be maybe average to even slightly above average. I think they're hoping for slightly above average. I like that a lot better than, hey, let's give him, 3 number 1 receivers. I think we overload young quarterbacks doing it that way.
Yeah, and we'll see how soon they address that position in the draft, and if they bring any more free agents in, some guys still available of intrigue still out there on the open market. I am curious to ask you this, Matt, about wide receivers coming out of the University of Tennessee. This year specifically with Dante Thornton and Brew McCoy. And it's been a big discussion point around here, the offense they're coming out of, and the fact that none of those guys yet, Jalen Hyatt, go back to Velus Jones, Cedric Tillman, have taken off in a way that could trickle down in terms of the impact it can have on recruiting for Tennessee and buck that trend that offense just doesn't translate in the NFL. Where are you on that concept as a whole, and specifically these two prospects with Thornton seemingly the higher rated one?
Yeah, my colleague at Yahoo Sports, Charles McDonald, and I have done a prospect deep dive series for I think this is the third year we've done it now on the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast feed, which I host over there. And he's called that offense the Looney Tunes offense, for the last few seasons. And it's just it's a great college offense. And Josh Heupel and the guys are dialed in on what it takes to win at the collegiate level, which that's their job. Their job is to not develop NFL receivers. Their job is to win football games and score a bunch of points, which they're great at doing. So I think the problem, though, is then when we're starting to look at these guys as NFL prospects, just a lot of what they do in that offense does not map to the NFL simply because the field is different. The sport really is different when we're just looking at the hash marks and the space that's available to them. I think Cedric Tillman's a great example of this. He's a guy that I think was coming on at times last year. Like if he had not had those concussion issues, I actually think that we might be talking about him a little bit differently if he was able to sustain the production that he had in the middle of the season for the Browns. But his rookie year was basically a complete wash. And yeah, a guy like Jalen Hyatt has not been able to produce because he had an even more like Tillman. If you're just stacking those two guys, and this is why I liked Tillman a little bit better as a prospect than Jalen Hyatt. Tillman actually had real deal NFL sort of alignment from a on the line of scrimmage, X receiver stuff, running some more real routes with while being along the boundary, whereas Hyatt just had all that space. That stuff, again, just does not map to the NFL. That being said, Cedric Tillman is one of these guys that lined up in his reception perception sample on 90.7% of his snaps at the right outside receiver position. That does not happen in the NFL. And this is something that I've focused on for, I would say, dating back to the 2017 class. I started to notice that the guys in college who only line up on one side of the field, they really struggle to make an immediate impact. I'm thinking of guys like Josh Doxton, Corey Coleman, Laquan Treadwell back in the day, like the busts of the busts. Quentin Johnston, with the LA Chargers, he struggled to make a consistent impact because he was only a one side of the field player. Again, it just doesn't map to the NFL at all from a deployment perspective. And I think that increases the learning curve when then you've got to come to the league and line up at multiple spots and multiple splits as opposed to just that one position where you're lining up in college.
Matt, we could keep going. So many more prospects I'd love to ask you about. Maybe we have you back before the draft to kind of cross some of those T's and dot some I's, man. But don't want to take up your entire day here. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a really fun class this year with some decent depth. So hopefully the Titans can grab somebody for Cam Ward here.
No doubt. Matt Harmon, the creator of Reception Perception, Yahoo Sports. Find him on Twitter at @MattHarmon_BYB has been our guest. Does great work. Great work. The NFL as a whole, but specifically the wide receiver position. Go follow his stuff if you're looking at some of those options for the Titans on days 2 and 3. Really appreciate him giving us some time. All right, coming up next, we will dip into the college ranks. Some interesting comments from Syracuse head coach Fran Brown about the concept that he and Deion Sanders tried to float out there that was nixed by the NCAA. We'll tell you what that is next on 104.5 The Zone.
If you are dealing with ED, there's no reason to freak out about it. That is a natural thing that happens to guys as you age. Your body starts to change, and you just want to make sure that you have the right support system in place, because maybe you've gone online and taken some pills, and the pills were effective for a period of time, but that's not an effective way to continue to treat the problem for you as an individual. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about getting ED treatment, and the Tennessee Men's Clinic is there to debunk those for you. Lots of men assume that if the pills stop working, they have no other options than to seek out treatments like irreversible surgery. Do not go through extremes before you've talked to the experts at the Tennessee Men's Clinic, because they specialize in men's sexual health issues. It's all they do, and it makes them the experts in the field. They have access to multiple protocols and options to treat ED based on your specific needs and what's going on in your body. So don't trust your health to an online pharmacy, and don't feel like you're out of options. We want you to understand all the options that you have available for you, because the Tennessee Men's Clinic is there with protocols that are patient-centered and customized to your needs. They have treatments for everything from low testosterone, ED, treatments that increase size, stamina, and everything else in between. So schedule an appointment online today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for their Franklin or Midtown location, or call them 615-208-9090.
So we were close, it felt like, to doing something in college football that just made too much sense. It was proposed by Deion Sanders, and we played the audio of it a couple weeks ago on what Deion wants to do with his spring game at Colorado. Wants to bring another team in. Wants to scrimmage another football team and even have some joint practices leading up to the spring game, much like the NFL. By the way, a little bit off topic, but Jim Wyatt did report from owners' meetings that the Titans will plan on having joint practices with 2 NFL teams coming up in training camp. We do not know what teams those are yet. So Deion Sanders stepped up to a podium, and he had that to say. And then Fran Brown, the head coach at Syracuse, quickly took to Twitter and submitted Syracuse as an option for Colorado to play in the spring game. In an era now, a year at least, where programs across the country are either canceling their spring game or choosing not to televise their spring game for fear of the transfer portal, which opens up right after the conclusion of spring practice. A rational fear, if you ask me, with the amount of tampering that already happens in college football and the idea of displaying all of your depth and your new recruiting class on national television for other coaches to say, oh, I like that guy, and slide into his DMs. I understand why coaches like Matt Rule and Michigan State are choosing not to have a spring game. But Deion wants to do the opposite. He wants to have it. He wants to play somebody. Fran Brown says, we'll do it. We'll bring the orange over there to Colorado. The NCAA says no. The NCAA shot down the request last week from Colorado. It came from Colorado to have a spring game with another football team. Colorado said it does not plan to appeal the NCAA decision and instead will play itself in its annual intra-squad spring game. That is coming up on April 19th. So USA Today came out with the documents that Colorado, the official proposal from Colorado to the NCAA. So Colorado officials made the point that spring scrimmages against other teams are allowed at the NCAA D2 level. Apparently, Missouri Southern is hosting East Central in a spring scrimmage April 11th. They also said practicing against another team would reduce injury risk to each team compared to practicing against your own teammates. Makes sense. Get 11 of your guys on the field rather than 22. And it would, quote, limit the amount of practice repetitions in comparison to a normal practice where the limited number of players on our spring roster roll through a multitude of practice repetitions in an intra-squad setting. All makes sense. NCAA turns it down, citing the request's late timing after other football programs have planned and started spring practice. It did not want to give those 2 teams, Colorado and Syracuse, a, quote, competitive and recruiting advantage by making an exception to the rules for them. But it did leave the door open for considering the concept at a broader level in the future. Okay, so here's Fran Brown, Syracuse head coach, when asked about the NCAA nixing Colorado's decision or proposal to have a spring game with Syracuse.
We should have just told Coach Belichick and Bill O'Brien to come up with it, and then they would have let them do it, and then it would have all went right. We shouldn't have been the first 2 dudes to say, damn well they wasn't about to let Coach Prime Time and Fran Brown be the first 2 guys to do it. I was over their dead bodies, so that wasn't happening that way. I'm just messing with you, NCAA. Don't get all mad and call out my AD and try to find me. I'm literally joking, but I think that they were headed.
So there you go, Fran Brown. No, I'm just messing with you. He didn't sound like he was joking. He was very, very deadpan. If he
sounded like a pro wrestler. He sounded like he was gonna have to attack somebody if they didn't. You're telling me Primetime and downtown Fran Brown aren't allowed to have a spring practice? What kind of madness is that? The only madness you're going to know is Sunday. On Sunday, when Syracuse brings the orange down on you. It sounded like he was really ready to just throw down with Bill Brown. On Sunday, we're going to see Bill O'Brien and the big... come on, what are we doing, man? Don't find me, NCAA. Yeah, you're definitely getting fined.
I mean, what do you think? Do you believe him? Do you think that if it was Bill Belichick, new darling head football coach at the college football level, Bill Belichick, and Bill O'Brien putting their heads together for this, that the NCAA would have said, oh, yes, Mr. Belichick, absolutely. We would love to have Boston College and North Carolina play a spring game.
I don't know if they would have said yes, but we would have talked about it a whole lot more, and we would have talked about it for a whole lot longer than it happened to be talked about.
Yep.
Like, I'm not saying it would get done. They would probably find some reason to be like, or other coaches would vote it down. Somebody wouldn't want to do it that's also important, But we would have definitely talked about it a whole lot longer than the week we talked about it.
Yeah. I understand why Fran Brown feels that way. I also understand the timetable aspect, right? That you're proposing this about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the spring game would actually happen. But this needs to come back around next year. The post-spring practice portal window needs to be done away with. And this is something we've got to revisit last year. I hope Deion Sanders and Fran Brown keep their foot on the gas with this and bring this back around with plenty of time ahead so the NCAA doesn't have the excuse of, well, it's too late in the game. You don't want to give you guys an unfair advantage when other schools didn't think this would be an option. They didn't think this would be an option because they didn't try to make it an option. Like Colorado and Syracuse were the only ones to say, yeah, let's do this. Everybody else had the freedom to come out and try something like this. Nobody did it. I did love this quote from Oklahoma State head coach Mike Gundy on the NCAA denying the joint spring practices. Quote, I'm not sure how they have grounds to say you can't do it. Like, if somebody just goes and does it, what are they going to do to them? And it's fair. We're very much in this era now where the NCAA says no. And you could just be like, okay, we're just going to do this anyway. And then what? What's going to happen? What's the NCAA going to do? Impose a bowl ban because you got Syracuse and Colorado together for a couple of joint practices? Really? That's what's going to give Colorado the upper hand in winning the Big 12 in 2025? So I did love that quote from Mike Gundy, who's always good for a quote every year. This is something that needs to be instituted. We need to see this in college football. We need to see joint spring practices and joint spring games. It just makes too much sense. There's no argument against here. None. Reduces injury risk to your team. Can make both teams better. Something to televise, something to watch that can resemble a football game, not these, pseudo scrimmage practice skills competitions is what it amounts to a lot of times with these spring games. So,
you know what else makes too much sense?
What?
Bringing the whole crew out to the First Horizon Park for a summer of fun. From Firework Fridays to can't miss theme nights and giveaways, there's something for everyone. Don't just watch the baseball. Experience with the Nashville Sounds. Grab your tickets at NashvilleSounds.com. But you don't have to do that. All you have to do is run to your phone. Grab it. Call us up because we've got caller number 5 is going to win 2 tickets to see the Sounds host the Memphis Redbirds next Wednesday at Horizon Park, and they're going to get a clear tote giveaway for the first 1,000 fans. So if you want those Sounds tickets, give us a call. I'll hook you up with it.
615-737-1045 for a spring game that counts. Oh, I can't wait to get out to watch some Sounds baseball.
I was just talking about it with Cheyenne the other day. We drove by and the big video board was going. I was like, I cannot wait to be in shorts, to be in a T-shirt, drinking a beer at the Sounds game.
615-737-1045. That can be you. All you got to do is be caller 5, and Robert Walsh here will get you hooked up. There is more smoke around potentially the last pre-draft quarterback domino to fall in the NFL. We'll tell you the latest on Kirk Cousins coming up next on 104.5 The Zone. It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. NFL owners' meetings are over in West Palm Beach. The vote to ban the tush push was tabled. As discussions on it will continue, it will likely be revisited during spring meetings with owners coming up in May. Titans made a signing yesterday, veteran cornerback and special teamer Justin Hardy signing a one-year deal. And there was another signing in the NFL, 38-year-old defensive lineman Calais Campbell signing with the Cardinals on a one-year deal worth $5.5 million. Campbell will be 39 when week 1 kicks off in the 2025 NFL season. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone. So we talked yesterday about the last quarterback domino to fall before the NFL draft. What will it be? Right now, it's between two players, Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. Who do we think officially finds their landing spot first for the 2025 season? Kirk Cousins is an unavailable player at the moment. He is a member of the Atlanta Falcons and is under contract, but the smoke is getting higher and higher on Kirk Cousins potentially being traded to a team in the AFC North. Welcome back. I'm Lucas Panzica with you until 1 o'clock, along with Robert Walsh. Buck Rising will be back to ruin all of our days tomorrow when he returns from West Palm Beach after taking in NFL owners' meetings and getting to spend some time away, which he never does do. Robert, we talked about at the top of the show that I am playing hurt. I sprained my ankle. I'm on crutches today. If Buck sprained his ankle, how long do you think he'd be on IR and away from the show?
Ooh, that's tough. He would probably not come into work, but he would do Zoom from his house because his ego would not allow him someone else to fill that void. He would hate it if we were just making fun of him without him being here. Now, if he's in West Palm Beach, laying on the beach, I don't think that's a big deal for him. But he would not be able to stand the show being taken away from him. He would just make it everyone else's business to lift him up in that situation. So we would have to be the ones carrying all the heavy weights while he just sat at home on Zoom. Kind of like the day, remember when it snowed really bad and then at like 8:45 he was like, yeah, it snowed too bad, I'm not coming in. It's like, dude, you had all morning to get that snow off your car.
Yeah, just took one look at it, just
like,
turned around and went back inside.
I think I'm going to stay on Zoom. That would be the situation you'd get if Buck sprained his ankle.
Not a fighter of adversity, Buck Rising. But we are, and we're here with you until 1 o'clock. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken, the best hot chicken in the world. Visit any one of their 7 Middle Tennessee locations for lunch today. Download the Hattie B's app. You get a free dessert just by doing so. So what does your gut tell you, Robert, on which domino falls first? Does Aaron Rodgers decide to get up and finally sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, which seems to be where all signs are pointing, or does Kirk Cousins get traded before that even happens? What comes first in your mind?
My feeling is Aaron Rodgers would have to sign somewhere before the draft, and I don't think Kirk gets traded until after the draft. So I would say Aaron, because the Steelers don't have time to sit around and wait. Because if the Steelers go into the draft and they draft a quarterback high who they trust, is that going to move Aaron off wanting to go there, not wanting to mentor someone? I think after yesterday when I was like, there's only one team that wants to trade for Kirk Cousins, that's the Browns, and after my dumbassery, now I look forward and say, like, well, hypothetically, if Aaron drags his feet long enough that this situation doesn't play out the way Pittsburgh's comfortable with it playing out, what's stopping them from trading for Kirk? What's stopping them from saying, like, veteran, younger veteran, one who is just got benched, but like I could see the
Not
Steelers.
Not as much of a problem child.
I could see the Steelers taking a swing on Kirk Cousins if Aaron Rodgers continued to drag his feet. But I think Aaron is going to sign before the draft, mostly because that Pat McAfee event that he's rumored to announce his signing at
in Pittsburgh
is before the draft.
Yeah.
So if that passes and he does not announce his signing, then I would start to become skeptical.
Yeah, and maybe that's the plan all along, right? Maybe Aaron Rodgers has already communicated that to the Steelers. You had Mike Tomlin this week at owners' meeting saying there is no timetable, there's no deadline right now for Rodgers. The visit went well, all of these things. Who knows? I mean, that might be a part of this discussion that we are not privy to. Aaron Rodgers. That does feel like the natural thing to do for Rodgers, to announce that in Pittsburgh at a live Pat McAfee show before the draft. So then you talk about Kirk Cousins and the idea of trading him before the 2025 season. And there's just more sort of scuttlebutt around that proposition here in the last week or so. In fact, Diana Rossini on her Scoop City podcast with The Athletic had something to say on it earlier this week down in West Palm Beach.
They still have so many questions at quarterback, which brings us to Kirk Cousins. Is that a real thing for Atlanta to trade Kirk to Cleveland? From my sense, yes.
Wow.
I don't know how far along it is right now. I just know there's enough smoke around this and enough conversations being had that this would not be a surprising move. Knowing Kevin Stefanski coached Kirk Cousins when he was in Minnesota, it makes a lot of sense on why that would work.
Lovely music in the back, the elevator music.
Isn't it crazy how, like, depending on who the host is, whatever background music you get, like with ESPN, you get this jarring, weird rock.
Like hard rock.
Like Diana, it's like beautiful, like massage lobby music, like something you would hear while you're at Massage Envy or something.
Just relax listening to her talk about Kirk Cousins. But it does make sense, right? I mean, obviously the Kevin Stefanski tie is there. It's the thing that would allow the Browns to address the quarterback position and take who they believe to be the best player in the draft, because the Browns theoretically have the opportunity to draft the best player in the NFL draft with the number two overall pick if the Titans are going to take Cam Ward. He is QB1 at this point. We all agree with that. He can be your franchise quarterback. But in terms of the best prospect in this draft, general consensus is it's not Cam Ward. It's not Shedeur Sanders. It's either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And when you hear Andrew Berry talk about Travis Hunter, I mean, just glowingly, he talks about the Colorado Star and obviously the medicals around Abdul Carter. So it would allow you that opportunity to address the quarterback position and to draft the best player with the number 2 overall pick and to not have to try and give up draft capital to move up to number 1 overall. Now, the natural next question is the contract, right? How much is that a part of the negotiation with Atlanta for them to take on some of that $180 million deal they gave Kirk Cousins to come and be the starter until they drafted Michael Penix Jr., who obviously took over midseason? But it does make sense from a lot of angles. And then there's this Chipotle gate. Did you see this? I just saw this yesterday. Apparently this happened last week, a few days ago, that Kirk Cousins was spotted in a Chipotle in Westlake, which is right outside of Cleveland. And everybody's taking pictures with Kirk Cousins at this Chipotle, and you've got the detectives out there alerting everybody that the Browns team physician is less than a mile away from the Chipotle that Kirk Cousins was at.
It seems like to me this was an agent plant. Like they're just trying to get Kirk a Chipotle deal. Like get Kirk his own chicken bowl because he quote tweeted it afterwards and said, "Double chicken and salad has never done me wrong." Like this is a total agent plant. I don't care where he was. If he was in Timbuktu, it wouldn't matter to me how his vicinity to Cleveland.
Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, has had to come out and make it clear that Kirk Cousins' Chipotle visit had nothing to do with the Cleveland Browns. So there is that. More and more signs are pointing to that. But that would make sense, and it would just be another team that you take out of the running to trade up for the number 1 overall pick. Who can we effectively eliminate right now as teams that could call the Titans and truly offer a king's ransom for the number 1 overall pick? The New York Jets, who are very publicly committed to Justin Fields as their starting quarterback. They give him a 2-year deal, $40 million. Is it 20 or 30 guaranteed? I can't remember off the top of my head. We can look at it here. But either way, Justin Fields is going to be the starter for the New York Jets this coming season. Don't anticipate them trading up from number 7. Don't anticipate the Raiders trading up. They go and get Geno Smith. Maybe they could still end up with a young quarterback in this draft, but not with the number 1 overall pick. So who's left? If Kirk Cousins is traded to the Browns, he would have to waive his no-trade clause to do so with Atlanta. You could take them out of the running. And Russell Wilson's talking like he's going to be the starter for the New York Giants, but like we talked about on this show, that would not preclude them from moving up to get Cam Ward if they had the opportunity to do so. But more and more teams are kind of falling by the wayside when you consider franchises that actually could offer what the Titans would need to move off of the number 1 overall pick. And they would need a lot. It would have to be quite a haul. In fact, Buck caught up with Titans GM Mike Borgonzi earlier this week down at NFL owners meetings and asked him about exactly that, what it would take to move off the number 1 overall pick. See if you can hear Borgonzi amidst the hustle and bustle of, I don't know, a food court or something at the Breakers Hotel. This was the Titans GM.
I don't want to say like a particular cost on it, but I mean, if we have the number 1 pick, obviously they're trading up for the perceived best player in the draft. So we're going to expect a big haul, for that draft pick if we do decide to do that. So that's our expectations. Yeah.
So we're going to expect a big haul if we do decide to do that. And it better be a big haul. If you're the Titans, it's a unique situation compared to other trades out of the number 1 overall pick. When the Titans did it in 2016 with the Rams, Titans had Marcus Mariota sitting right there, right? When the Panthers did it, trading out of the number 1 overall pick for last year's draft for the Bears to go up and get Caleb Williams, the Panthers had Bryce Young sitting right there. If the Titans are to trade out of the number 1 overall pick, part of the discussion has to be, listen, this is us getting out of the opportunity to draft our franchise quarterback number 1 overall. You got to give us something that makes it worth potentially starting Will Levis again in 2025. What is that worth in a draft haul to get out of the number 1 overall pick? I'd argue there's no amount of picks worth or more valuable than getting your franchise quarterback if you believe Cam Ward can be that. That's my argument, and that's probably what's going to happen. But it's a unique situation with that number 1 pick in that the Titans, teams can't call up the Titans and say, come on, you have a quarterback. What will it take? That's not the case here. Titans have Will Levis and Brandon Allen, and Brian Callahan can talk as glowingly about those guys as he wants to, but good luck selling tickets and winning games in 2025 with that as your quarterback room, given what we know about those players. It's given us just enough wiggle room, Robert, to talk about the possibilities. Like the Titans' messaging has been so consistent in that now we're nearing a decision. All of our options are open. It's been that since day one. And it's given us just that little bit of space to say, oh, well, what if? What if they don't draft Cam Ward? Whereas the majority of the time, it's a foregone conclusion when that team has a need and sitting there at number 1, they're going to take a quarterback.
Yeah, and it's also tough for me to completely cross anyone that in the top 10 that doesn't have a quarterback on a rookie deal out of wanting a top quarterback. It's tough for me to even say the Jets wouldn't be interested in a Cam Ward. A 2-year deal is a flyer. You know what I mean? They made him a starter. He's going to be a starter this year. But to say that they would have zero interest would be tough for me to say. So that's why I think the Titans could still end up having a suitor despite all the signs pointing that them taking Cam Ward. I still think somebody could say, if I'm the Giants, why would I not trade the farm? I'm going to get fired anyway. If we have a substandard season, I'm going to be fired anyway. Why would I not take all the furniture, all the fridge stuff with me? Well, just empty it out in a big bag like the Grinch and leave nothing but the wires hanging on the wall. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out swinging. And y'all are going to have no picks. So you might as well let me stay here and play in the mud than try to hire somebody that doesn't want to come to this stinky-ass job. That's me, at least. But do what you want to do.
So is the door actually still cracked is the question that we keep coming back to for the Titans of potentially getting out of the number 1 overall pick. We'll see what Zach Lyons thinks of Cover 2, football and other F words. He'll be in studio coming up next.
Will I have enough money when I retire? When should I start to draw from Social Security? If these are the questions that are keeping you up late at night, let me direct you to a team that's there to keep you on the right track and guide you through it. That's Trajan Wealth, Trajan Wealth, not just any financial firm. They're your partners in securing your financial future. They're more than just a fiduciary firm. They're a family-owned, veteran-led team that puts your needs first. So let their decades of experience specializing in retirement planning and wealth management work for you. Trajan Wealth offers free consultations to help you develop your plan and your peace of mind. So call them today at 615-270-5000. That's 615-270-5000. Or visit them online at TrajanWealth.com. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This is a paid advertisement.
Ford is Ford Truck Central. We've got the trucks, all the trims, all the towing, all the bells and whistles, and all at Truck Month Savings. Two Rivers Ford is Ford Truck Central.
Did you know you're overpaying for your health and wellness products?
With over 20 company-owned brands offering its members vitamins, supplements, wellness, and skincare products, you're able to save up to 70% off retail.
Members Nutrition can't change your life, but we can change the way you live.
So is the door actually cracked for the Titans to get out of that number 1 overall pick? Zach Lyons joins us. You will hear him from 1 to 3 with Blaine Bishop on Cover 2 every weekday on 104.5 The Zone. Also football and other F words alongside Stoney Keeley. First of all, thank you for coming in a little early and hanging out.
No problem. This I'm just now seeing the background, this red light back here. I'm in like the red light district over here.
That's right. That's my corner typically.
Yeah.
Yeah. You like it over there? How do you feel?
I mean, it feels all right. It reminds me of hanging out, watching the Titans games, the miserable experience of watching Titans games with you here in the studio. Not because of you, but because of the play on the field.
Okay, good. Thank you. So how different will that experience be if the Titans do not draft Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick?
If they do not draft Cam Ward with the number, it will probably be the same as last year. It'll be terrible. We'll have a coach firing mid-season. Not to say that couldn't still happen with Cam Ward, but it will be just as of a exhaustive, life-stealing process as it was last year.
Are you how much are you keeping that door open in your mind? The idea of them trading out as they continue to message about keeping all their options open on what it would take to move off that pick, how they're not exactly at a finalized decision yet, or are you still are you just kind of brushing that stuff like, guys, it's going to be Cam Ward?
Yeah, so I had this crisis of conscience moment on my way home last night from the show because I've been a very much like 98%, 99% it's Cam Ward.
Yeah, like, guys, calm down. They're going to draft Cam Ward.
They're going to draft Cam Ward. And for whatever reason, I just had this gut sensation, this gut feeling, no logic behind it. Absolutely zero logic behind this gut feeling, but I'm just like, man, what if they're just playing us all for fools and they're going to trade back at 3 because the Giants become so desperate and they end up drafting like Shadur Sanders at 3. But then you're thinking, well, they picked up probably 2 extra firsts, some extra mid-round picks in day 2, and you're thinking, okay, well, that's not so bad. But then when you go back to reality, you got to come back to reality. It's Cam Ward. I don't care what the chat kind of says. The chat gets in there and they make up all these conspiracy theories and stuff. But when you got Amy Adams Strunk flying down for a private workout, like we said on the show on Friday when we were at Dickens Turf and Landscape, Easton has confirmed that today because I tracked the flight of her because I'm a crazy person.
Ah, you're one of those.
I'm one of those.
Hey, they're necessary.
They're necessary sometimes. So now that she has been the cat's out of the bag and confirmed that she was down there, I mean, I think that pretty much tells you everything you need to know. And sure, maybe they're going to use a virtual meeting, and then they're going to come out and say, with 2 weeks left, Cam Ward's our guy. Cam Ward's their guy. I mean, we just saw Brian Callahan have an interview with Kevin Clark on a bench down at the owners' meetings, and it's Cam Ward. It's all Cam Ward. I mean, like, there's just no reason that's not Cam Ward.
Are you sure you're not just trying to scare away those demons that's kind of lingering in the back of your mind?
Well, there's a little bit of that, to it, but I look at it all, and this team needs a quarterback. He's the best quarterback. In their mind, I'm still Team Shadur. But, and throughout their scouting process, they're investigating their background checks, all that kind of stuff. It all just keeps coming back Cam Ward. I mean, like, there's just no denying it at this point.
We're not talking about the ownership aspect of this at all. And there is zero evidence to suggest that Amy Adams Strunk has ever inserted herself into a personnel decision, right? Whether it's the draft with Bud Adams. Bit of a different story.
Yeah, with the draft.
Let's
clarify.
Amy Adams Strunk,
she's never inserted herself in personnel decisions in the draft.
There is not a shred of evidence to tell us that she has ever said, no, this is who you're taking.
Yeah.
Right? Put the foot down, as so many owners do.
I mean, there's no true evidence. There's rumors, about Will Levis and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I mean, there's people
Nothing
like
tangible.
Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports went on podcast, Michael Smith's podcast, and said, hey, that was ownership driven.
Right. But nothing tangible that we know of, where it is tangible for many owners in the NFL. But could there be an element of that here, where Amy Adams Strunk is messaging to them, no, we have the number 1 pick. You're taking a quarterback.
I don't think so. I think this was more of a, hey, come down, this is our guy. And we want you to have that. We want you to feel like you have not that they're saying this, but like have a final seal of approval. Like, this is the final step. We want to make sure that you like him, but this is the guy we're taking. Like, that's why she was down there. This is the guy that we have fallen in love with. This is the guy that we want to take at 1.01. You need to meet him. So, there you go. That to me is all that really says. It's more of a solidification, a extra step in the process, if you will, touch point, if you will. But I don't think that it's coming down. I'm sure there is some directive of winning games, but she has said that she is stepping back. Burke Nihill's controlling the business side of things. Chad Brinker's controlling the football side of things. They are her voice. They are the people spending some FaceTime down there. We didn't see any Amy Adams-Strunk down there at the owners meeting, right? So like we saw a sit-down interview with Burke Nihill.
She was there, but yeah.
She was there, but I mean, like, apparently the way the Buck describes it, like she's getting secret serviced around, got bodyguards and all this kind of stuff. So at this point, I just think it was hey, come meet this guy that we all approve of.
So the Titans sent the cavalry down to Cam Ward's pro day, and like you said, Amy Adams-Strunk going down for the private workout. Brian Callahan will not be attending Shedeur Sanders' pro day, or showcase, as Deion Sanders is calling it. Neither will Chad Brinker. So either Cam Ward is their guy, and it's all but locked in that he's the number 1 overall pick, or this is the best pre-draft messaging smokescreen strategy we've ever seen for a team with the number 1 overall pick.
It really would be.
It would be. I mean, you'd have to tip your hat at some point.
Yeah.
But my question is, okay, if that is the case, if it's, hey, this is our guy, Miss Amy, come down, you probably need to meet him. If that is the situation, why continue this messaging of, no, hey, look, options open, we're not there yet? Why keep that door cracked for the number 1 overall pick? Because in my mind, if you believe this guy is your franchise quarterback, there's no amount of draft capital that is more valuable than having your franchise quarterback.
Well, I think there is a tipping point. Like, it depends on how close is Shedeur Sanders to Cam Ward in their mind. And if they're close on the big board, which I would imagine that they view these as the top 2 quarterbacks, obviously, right? They've spent a lot of time with Shedeur Sanders. So maybe, I know the NFL media tends to think there's a big, wide gap between the two. And I know certain scouts, and we don't know what teams these scouts even work for, what's their track record, have come out and said that, there's a big gap between Shedeur. I mean, I just don't think there really is. I remember everybody said that, the DUI for Tavondre Sweat is going to knock him down to the 4th or 5th round. And I'm like, no, dudes, he's still going high second. Like that, the tape is the tape. So there is a scenario where if Shedeur and Cam Ward are actually close together in their evaluations on their big board, that the prospects of Shedeur Sanders plus 5 or 6 draft picks, that's a pretty good value. I mean, that's a hard value to turn down, but it's all based upon their evaluation. Now, if their evaluation says that Cam Ward is the clear number 1 by a wide margin, then yes, it would be tougher. But I think that's why the messaging from the messaging being leaked to the media seems to have changed at some point. It seemed to be that you could probably get a bargain of a number 1 overall pick. If you're the Giants, you could probably get a bargain. And now they've supposedly bumped up their asking price. Now, if you ask me, their asking price should have always been very, very high because you have the number 1 overall pick. Don't be bad negotiators and bad businessmen. But now it's going to take the historic haul. That's what we've heard. It's going to take a haul. It's going to take a lot. And that's exactly what the Bears said about Caleb Williams. The Bengals were open for business all the way up to Wednesday of the draft, before it was actually known to Joe Burrow by ownership that he was going to be the pick. Because if you go back and read those articles, they even mentioned, unless there was a historic trade, they were going to take Joe Burrow. And that's kind of how it works, right? I mean, that's just how the NFL works. If you have your guy, you always keep the business. So it's bad business to shut the door. Does not mean they couldn't come out and say, Cam Ward's our guy. I think that actually helps get the trade going and get you what you want if you just come out and say Cam Ward's your guy, but there's still a lot of time to say that.
Zach Lyons in studio. Hear him coming up from 1 to 3 with Blaine Bishop on Cover 2, football and other F words, also wherever you get your podcasts on the Zone Podcast Network. We are spending so much time talking about the number 1 pick, and rightfully so, that I feel like we're going to get to draft week and be like, or at least get to Friday, right? When we know Cam Ward is a Tennessee Titan. And then we're going to say, oh, we've got 6 other rounds to talk about. Okay.
Yeah.
Who do we look at here? We've hardly talked about day 2 and beyond for the Titans. And I guess that's just, they haven't had the number 1 pick here in a decade. And last time they had it, they traded it. So I guess that's just the way things go. But for you, day 2, let's say there is a best available edge. 3HL asked me this question a few days ago at Fog Street Lawn Club. Best available edge, best available wide receiver. They are comparable in terms of how they stack up on your board. What direction do you go?
Oh man, that's tough. Because I love the question, but I'm going to say I think I go edge at depending on what it is, the players obviously. But if we're talking about edge, has depth that's going to come off the board a little bit faster, and I do think there are day 3 wide receivers in this particular draft that because edge is going to start. Here's the thing. The draft kind of is very cyclical in how it works. What they see one Super Bowl team do, everybody's going to try to copycat it. So it's a copycat league. So I think edge rushers are going to fly off the board at a much higher rate. We already knew this was a really strong edge class anyway, so I think you need to go edge. When there's a run on a position like that, other positions tend to suffer. So I kind of think that the edge class may push down the wide receiver class. I think the offensive guard class and interior offensive linemen and tackles will push down the wide receiver class a little bit because of what we see. The trenches matter, pass rushers matter in the Super Bowl. That's what everybody's going to try to duplicate this year. And I think that you're going to be able to find maybe a wide receiver or 2 in the 4th round, whereas edge rusher will likely all be dried up. So I'm taking edge rusher if there is no trade back option.
So if you're talking about a wide receiver on day 3, who comes to mind for you as somebody that could help this team in a wide receiver room that is Calvin Ridley and let's be honest, right now, almost nobody else, right? Van Jefferson is currently wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I like Kyle Williams. He's very, very borderline. He's a guy that will likely sneak into round 3, the bottom of round 3. This is likely what I see. If Kyle Williams is there, Washington State wide receiver, if he is there at the top of the 4th round, they're drafting him. Once round 3 ends, that night, Friday night, if round 3 ends and you see that Kyle Williams is still a wide receiver on the board, I would bet my money they take him at the top of the 4th round. I think another guy that's got 1st-round talent that is falling, maybe 2nd-round talent that is falling because of character concerns, is Isaiah Bond, the Texas wide receiver.
Bama transfer. That guy kind of screams like Tyreek Hill to me in a sense of we saw that the Chiefs were willing to take a chance on a guy that had only had 1 year production in college whatsoever because he was a track star, and he had a lot worse off-field issues than what Isaiah Bond has. And I could see that because of Mike Bergonzi's drafting history at wide receiver, that Isaiah Bond being a guy, he was a formal combine invite and a top 30 or 30 visit coming up next week. He is also a guy that I would put on the radar. Now, I'm not supposed to hype up Isaac Tesla or anything because just in case other NFL teams have their scouts scouting this station or scouting football and other F words, we do not like Isaac Tesla. But if Isaac Tesla was there in the 6th round, I think they draft Isaac Tesla. But we hate. He's terrible. Whisper into the microphone.
Yeah, he is terrible. He's really good, but he is a terrible wide receiver, and so we don't like Isaac Tesla. We love him, but we don't like him.
Okay, so you feel okay about getting impact players at receiver on day 3 of the draft more than you would edge.
Yes.
Is kind of what you're saying.
I think it's going to be just how the supply and demand works in the draft. It's. Maybe I'm completely off base and all the wide receivers will fly off the board in that day 2. But I really do think that edge is going to be the position that is going to be you're going to be really struggling to find guys in round 4 and beyond. Now, there is a rumor that Princely Umanamalian, did I nail that right? From Ole Miss, it could be a day 3 pick. And if he is there at day 3 in that 4th round, I'd be very surprised. But, his production, his tape, and all that kind of stuff, I could see him dropping that's a guy that you could pair with a Kyle Williams or someone else in that day 3 round, where you still get a guy who could be an impact player. But it's going to be very tough to find an edge guy that has production and the athleticism. That's what you want in an edge rusher: production and athleticism, both. And there's a lot of athletic edge rushers, but you need both. And that's why I think they almost have to go in the second round in edge rusher.
Well, and another thing that has kind of been lost in the discussion as we devote so much time to the number 1 overall pick is the lack of a third-round pick. And again, the Titans have publicly put out this strategy of 30 draft picks in 3 years, right? Okay, the quickest way to at least be on pace, close to on pace for that, would be to trade out of number 1. But if they're not going to trade out of number 1, like, that's still a goal that's hovering out there, to get at least as close as possible to 30 draft picks in 3 years. So then you ask yourself, how can they go about that in this draft and still end up with a third-round pick? Likely having to move down your number or your second-round pick, right? From the top of the second round to whoever you potentially trade with to end up with the third-round pick. That could impact the direction you go, whether it's edge or receiver in the second round. Is there a path forward to you that does not involve trading away the number 1 overall pick that leaves the Titans with a third-rounder in 2025?
Well, there's 2 ways you could look at it. Why is trade up not a possibility? Everybody talks about trading back, and I'll talk about trading back too, because I do think that's their aim. But you have 2 4th-round picks, you have 2 5th-round picks, 2 6th-round picks. You could trade up into the 3rd round. I mean, right? I mean, there's nothing really stopping you from doing it. If you maybe the low end of the 3rd round, maybe you're going to be picking at like 102 or instead of 103. If you think that there's that big of a difference, or maybe you go up to 90, right? You can do that. I think that 235 is what they want to trade down from. So 2nd round, and you look at last year, the Arizona Cardinals held the 35th overall pick. They traded back with the Falcons, picked up a second and they swapped seconds. They only dropped down like 43, 46, somewhere around there, and they picked up a 3rd. They only had to give up that 235, and I think it was 189 in the 6th round, and the Titans have 188 in the 6th round or something like that. So, like, you can almost duplicate that entire trade. What you really need is no Jackson Dart to go in the 1st round. Because if Jackson Dart goes in the 1st round, you may still have the Browns right there trying to draft Jackson Dart and people trying to trade up there, but you need some premium positions to fall. And it's very possible, right? Luther Burden could fall. Egbuka could fall. James Pierce could fall. Those are guys that play premium positions that are high-end talents that are rumored to have issues with where they may fall. So to me, I look at it and I go, this will be super, super valuable pick. And if they can't find anybody that wants to trade up because the board doesn't fall that way, then you're still getting a premium position player that possibly could make up for that 3rd round pick.
To that point, what happened with Will Levis and the Titans? Fell out of the 1st round to the top of the 2nd. Titans traded up to get him and gave up what?
I mean, they gave up a 3rd round pick. They did a 3rd round pick swap, but also gave up a future 3rd round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
exactly. So there are ways to stack up draft capital. That it's not something I had thought about. Jackson Dart falling out of the 1st round to the top of the 2nd being something that could be favorable for the Titans, sitting right there at the top of the 2nd round. Is there a free agent out there that you most want the Titans to sign?
Zadarius Smith. I don't know. I know there's probably a holdup on his end because he probably doesn't want to come to a non-contender at his age. But I'd sign Zadarius Smith because he's just like Kevin Zeitler. He may be a 1-year rental guy, but he's an impact player. So I'm all in on doing Zadarius Smith and still drafting an edge at 35 because at this point, no offense to the players on the roster, but you don't have 2 edge rushers. 2 starting caliber edge rushers. And to me, the reason I don't include Draymond Jones in that is because I feel like he's better with his hand in the dirt than he is an edge rusher. And if you have another edge rusher behind him, even if it's a rookie, you provide yourself with more flexibility.
Not a receiver out there that draws your eye right now?
Elijah Moore,
Yeah.
but at this
Tyler Lockett.
yeah, Tyler Lockett maybe. I mean, I like both those guys.
They probably have more suitors, you would think.
You would think they probably would have already signed by now,
Yeah.
but that to me says their asking price is too high.
Lockett, an older player, but remarkably available over.
Well, look at
over his
Tyler
career.
Boyd, right? So Tyler Boyd was a guy that had rumblings, but he wanted to wait till after the draft. And then after the draft, he got signed by the Tennessee Titans. So a lot of these, right now, you're probably not going to see a lot of movement, big-time movement on the free agent market with some of the names that fans have been clamoring for because they're going to be waiting for the draft. And then there, your market's reset if you're a free agent. What teams was interested in you decided they weren't going to wait on you? What does that mean your price goes down? Does it mean that your price goes up because maybe a lot of teams didn't feel the need that you thought? So, like, I think right now that we're going to be in a holding pattern for a little bit on the more known names in free agency.
It's coming up on Cover 2 today.
We got Easton Freeze, who wrote the article today for A to Z Sports. He's going to be on at 1:20, breaking down the article, how he feels about Cam Ward. We're going to talk about actually picking up that round 3 pick, why it's so important. And we're going to be talking about some of the comments about Brian Callahan, talking about Joe Burrow, which means he's talking about Cam Ward.
Would you ask him if Emeka Ibuka isn't a first-round pick, if he is truly going to eat his shorts? I don't know if you missed that tweet yesterday.
The shorts eating will be happening.
If I'm with him. I think he's a first-round talent. But
Who
anytime
says he's gonna eat
someone
his
says...
shorts?
Easton said.
Easton's going to eat his shorts.
Well, we know this because he can't ride a bike. They won't be bicycle shorts.
Okay, there you go.
I'd be surprised if Buck could ride a bike. Cover 2 coming up from 1 to 3. Football and other F words coming out
Thursday, 6 p.m.
Thursday night, wherever
Thursday
you get
night.
your podcast. Zach, appreciate it, man.
No problem. Thanks.
Zach Lyons. Hear him coming up with Blaine Bishop. Last call for phone call, 615-737-1045. We will wrap up the show, do the polls coming up next. Let's call for phone calls, 615-737-1045. Appreciate y'all hanging out today. 1045 The Zone TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. If you missed any of the show, Matt Harmon earlier at 11:20 with some really good stuff on this wide receiver class. Some of the options that might be available to the Titans on day 2 of the draft and just ways the Titans can put potential number 1 overall pick Cam Ward in an advantageous situation with the wide receiver room as it's currently constructed, pretty bare. So a lot of work to be done there. Matt Harmon of Reception Perception. That interview is up on YouTube, 1045 The Zone on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe while you're there for all the 1045 The Zone content. Of course, you can always go back and listen to the Buck Rising Show wherever you get your podcasts. Unfortunately for everybody, Buck Rising will be back on the Buck Rising Show tomorrow from his trip down in West Palm Beach. But we will clear out of here in a little bit for Blaine and Zach cover 2 coming up from 1 to 3, 3HL after that. Got you covered all the way up until 7 o'clock on The Zone. By the way, a big happy birthday to the mayor, 3HL's host, the one and only Brent Doherty.
We do care.
We care. We care a lot. I hope Brent doesn't mind that I've had my foot propped up on the console here for most of the show.
I don't think that's a big deal unless someone would be eating off of it. You generally have good, what's it called when you don't stink?
Hygiene.
Yeah, you got good hygiene. You know, it's not like me. If I was in there and I was throwing my feet up on there, everybody would be, oh, why does it smell like onions in here? What does that smell?
Well, you also have Crocs, which do Crocs count as open-toed?
Maybe open toe. Sometimes my middle toe is so long that it hangs out that that open hole in the front. But I'd say no, because you can get steel toe Crocs now. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's my next big purchase.
You don't have them yet?
No steel toe Crocs yet.
That's a great birthday gift for you. So happy birthday, Brent. Can you hear him coming up later on 3 o'clock on 3HL? This little experience I've had of spraining my ankle yesterday playing soccer and having to walk around on crutches. I can't put any weight on my left foot. It's made me realize just how much of a baby I am. And talking to my fiance, Megan, who is in healthcare, like, how are you just generally when it comes to pain tolerance? Because if you listen to her, and I believe this, she says that in her experience in healthcare, men have like a 90% worse pain tolerance than women most of the time, which I can believe. Like, women have to deal with childbirth. You know what I mean? Like, I think men are way worse about little things, little bruises and cuts here and there than women are generally. Do you agree with that in your experience, whether it's like you dealing with something versus Cheyenne?
See, I would say if it was a sickness, I would agree with you. If I have a cold, I am a puny little baby. Now, like, nothing is going to knock me off my spot. I'm going to be in the bed with a heating pad underneath me. I'm going to be crying. I'm going to be ringing a little bell for her to bring me grapes and soup and whatnot.
Great.
But if it's an injury, I think I trudge through a lot more physical pain than I would ailments, if that makes sense. Like if I have like right now, last night I cut pretty deep into my finger when I was preparing dinner, and every time I type, it hurts. But like, it's not something that I would complain about. Not something I would bring up on a radio show for all of Nashville to hear.
I am the complete inverse of that. When it comes to sickness and a cold, like, I can plow through it. I can mind over matter. Yeah, my throat hurts, but it is what it is. It'll be gone in a few days. Plow right through it. But when it comes to stuff like this, I am a huge baby, sitting there with my little foot elevated and asking for an ice pack and more pillows to put under my foot. Also, crutches are exhausting. Walking on crutches, every 10 yards, I have to stop and catch my breath, I feel like. It feels like a workout, just walking on crutches.
We do have a wheelchair in the office if you would like a wheelchair.
Do we?
No, I just made that up.
Oh, I love that.
You think we have kind of good insurance like that?
I mean, you and I are about to go to lunch here in a few minutes.
Oh, I'm so excited.
At a local establishment. I am as well. I might need you to... Did you ever watch Arrested Development?
Never.
Oh, Martin Short has an incredible character in Arrested Development. He's Uncle Jack of the family, and his legs don't work, so he has a giant bodyguard just carry him around at all times.
Oh, that'd be great.
And he's like yelling at his nephews and nieces as this literally 7-foot tall bodyguard is carrying him, because Martin Short is famously very short. So I might need you to carry me like Uncle Jack in Arrested Development into this restaurant, if you don't mind.
I can do that, but then I would have to take away your nickname, Lucas playing through the pain Zika.
Oh, well, we can't have that. Karen on the F&M Bank chat says men are big babies when they are sick. So Mark says, normally, yes, I would agree with the pain statement. I have an autoimmune disorder that leaves me in pain constantly, but if you see me out, you could not tell it. Okay. So generally, I think we agree, though. Men deal with pain a little bit worse than women do, just generally speaking. Let's do some polls. Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer.
That's my favorite one. I don't care what anybody says.
It's a good one.
Billy Bob Thornton in that movie, you would never be. It's almost on the level of Leonardo DiCaprio in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Just a fantastic
total commitment
acting performance. What is your dumbest thing in sports this week? Karen chimes in saying the Braves signing Jurgensen Profar in the
close enough.
Yeah, that was my best guess in the offseason, only to have him suspended for 80 games for PEDs. Bayer says the fan run Final Four. It'll be a miracle if no one dies or has a severe orthopedic injury. And Kyle Fuller saying the Yankees manipulating their bats to something resembling a bowling pin and immediately hitting 9 home runs in one MLB game.
It's not just the Yankees. A lot of teams are going to be doing that. That is a tough look for the Braves. Big-time signing in the offseason. The fact that it comes up just a few games into the season, it's like, how did this not come about earlier? Suspended basically the entirety of the campaign.
You say his name.
I believe it's Jurickson Profar. I could be wrong. I think that's how I heard Tony Kornheiser say it on PTI yesterday.
Well, Kornheiser's not wrong.
Keep it moving.
What position do you want the Titans to address more on day 2 of the NFL draft? Wide receiver taking this one 67% with edge, trailing behind 32%. In the comments, people are saying, yeah, hell yeah, we want a wide receiver. Who they're going to throw the ball to, which I would like to headbutt those people.
I mean, if you want to find out about Cam Ward, I'm in favor of taking a receiver. But look, if the run happens in the first round and Luther Burden and Matthew Golden and Tet McMillan and all these guys are off the board and you're left with Trey Harris or an edge rusher you have way up on your board, then yeah, take the higher impact player.
Is there an available wide receiver you want the Titans to sign? Kenny Pruitt's chiming in with Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen. John Feely with wanted Elijah Moore the year before the Titans drafted Farley. I'd bring in Moore now since he's still young and won't cost a lot. Andrew in Portland giving us a plethora of names. Tyler Lockett, Nelson Aguilar, Elijah Moore. Cheap 1-year contract type deal.
I don't know how cheap Tyler Lockett would be. Moore probably would be cheaper and would give you an option in the slot.
What is the baseline minimum for a trade package that you would make? You would be okay with the Titans trading out of number 1. David Ferris saying a 2026 number 1 with a 1 this year. John Feely chiming in with the Titans want a haul, but I've said all along I want to trade to 3, and I would accept 3, 65, and a 2026 first. I'm upset that you didn't keep the poll what it was originally of just saying what is the absolute minimum baseline.
Just that. What is your absolute baseline minimum? No context.
That's what I would want.
Pick swap to 3, pick 65 in next year's first, not enough for me. Not enough. You got to have multiple firsts in there outside of the pick swap. Those the polls?
Those the polls.
That's the show. Cover 2 coming up next with Blaine and Zach. Buck Rising will be back in studio tomorrow. We are, of course, fueled by Hattie B's, and we'll talk to you guys then.